Uncorrected page proofs not for resale. The Hermetic Science of Transformation, the Initiatic Path of Natural and Divine Magic. Giuliano Kremmerz, a classic initiatic primer for the serious magical aspirant. Available now for the first time in English. Details occult purification and preparations for the path of natural and divine magic. Explains how initiation into the Hermetic science transforms the novice not only mentally but also physically, altering even the very fluids of the body. Offers a return to the original Hermetic path of initiation, following the strict procedures and symbolism as defined in the spiritual practices of Pythagoras and his tradition. The main purpose of the Hermetic science, as seen by Giuliano Kremmerz, 1861–1930, Italian alchemist, hermeticist, philosopher, and member of the Your group, is to allow the adept to concentrate on the natural and divine magic that will allow him or her to develop the latent powers innate in every human being. The initiatory path this opens, one the author compares to the royal way of alchemy, transforms the novice not only mentally but also physically, altering even the very fluids of his or her body. For Kremmerz, magic is the supreme science, the highest expression of what exists and what is possible. With this book, first published in Italian in 1897 and available here for the first time in English, Kremmerz sought to redefine magical initiation as well as other key components of the occult sciences. His aim was to bring the Hermetic path of initiation back into alignment with the strict procedures and symbolism that defined the spiritual practices of Pythagoras and the heirs to his tradition. He visualized the initiate as a disciple who has escaped the stagnant water in which the rest of humanity is immersed and entered a state of non-ordinary consciousness, one that allows for the successful pursuit of realization and contact with the magical will. In this transformative initiatory guide, Kremmerz details the occult purification and preparation the path of natural and divine magic requires. The spiritual course advocated by Kremmerz is arduous, to move forward on the path of true realization, one that will allow the initiate to climb to heaven while still alive. The aspirant must commit to total severance from everyday life. Yet Kremmerz's words themselves serve to trigger the beginning of transformation within us, making the very act of reading this primer the first step on the path of initiation into the Hermetic science. Giuliano M. Kremmerz, 1861–1930, also known as J. M. Kremmerz and born as Ciro Formicino, was an Italian alchemist, hermeticist, philosopher, and prominent member of the Your group, alongside Julius Evola. He was initiated into the mysteries of the sacred science by Pasquale de Service, known as Isa, and published writings on natural and divine magic through the journal Il Mondo Secreto. In 1896 he founded the Schola Philosophica Hermetica Classica Italica and its associated body Fratellanza Therapeutica Magica di Miriam, Therapeutic and Magic Brotherhood of Miriam, a school and group still in operation in Italy today. Inner Traditions ISBN 978-1-62055-908-630, CAN $37.50. Hardcover also available as an ebook 240 pages, 6x911 black and white illustrations. Rights, World English Occult / Esoteric November, 2019 Hermetic Science of Transformation _ marketing cover. Ind 1 7 September, 2019 9:58 a.m. The Hermetic Science of Transformation. Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 1 7 September, 2019 9:40 a.m. Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 2 7 September, 2019 9:40 a.m. The Hermetic Science of Transformation. The Initiatic Path of Natural and Divine Magic. Giuliano Kremmerz, translated by Fernando Picci. Translation of foreword and introduction by Jane Rumsby. Inner Traditions, Rochester, Vermont. Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 3 7 September, 2019 9:40 a.m. Inner Traditions 1 Park Street Rochester, Vermont 05767 www.innertraditions.com Copyright symbol 1982, 2000 by Edizioni Mediterranee English translation Copyright symbol 1982 by Edizioni Mediterranee English translation of foreword and introduction Copyright symbol 2019 by Inner Traditions International originally published in Italian under the title Introduzione alla Scienza Hermetica by Edizioni Mediterranee, via Flamina, 10900196 Roma First U.S. edition published in 2019 by Inner Traditions all rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced or utilized in any form or by any means, electronic or mechanical, including photocopying, recording, or by any information storage and retrieval system, without permission in writing from the publisher. Cataloging in publication data for this title is available from the Library of Congress ISBN 978-62055-908-6, print, ISBN XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX, ebook, printed and bound in XXXXX 109876543221 Text design and layout by Priscilla Baker. This book was typeset in Garamond Premiere Pro with Futura and Fabolo used as display typefaces. Hermetic Science of Transformation. Int for 7 September 2019 9:40 a.m. Contents Translators Forward by Fernando Picci 00 Introduction 00 An appeal to aspirants to the light 00 to the disciples of the great art 00 Part 1 Introduction to the science of the occult sciences for those who conquer it 00 Magic, the magician, and the uncommunicable secret 00 The universe and man in the occult doctrine 00 Spiritualism 00 In conclusion 00 Part 2 Elements of natural and divine magic preparation 00 General principles 001 The perfect master 002 The disciple 003 Intelligent powers, forces, and creations 00 Hermetic Science of Transformation. Int 7 September 2019 9:40 a.m. Part 3 The Mysteries of Thaumaturgy. The Aphorisms 00 The Catechism of the First Stages of Magic 00 Rights and Will 00 Will and Desire 00 Will and Invocation 00 Ariel and the Will Soul 00 Will and Words 00 Will and Conjurations 00 Will and Graphic Signs 00 Science and Will 00 How Force is Communicated 00 Science, Will, and Force 00 Equilibrium and Force 00 Justice and Force 00 Purity and Force 00 Passions and Force 00 The Purity of Ariel 00 Ariel the Creator 00 Dominant Ariel 00 Epilogue 00 Index 00 Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 7 September 2019 9:40 a.m. Translators Forward by Fernando Picci. Science and Faith, the two cornerstones of modern culture and human progress. Unfortunately, these two words, or rather, the concepts and methods they represent, are too often interpreted erroneously. Thus we frequently end up witnessing a conflict between two opponents, sometimes in bad faith, each of which tries to demonstrate its superiority over the other. This is why adjectives are applied so as to better define the two words and make distinctions between such things as blind faith and reasoned faith, official sciences and occult sciences, and so forth. It's quite natural at this point that some would include the occult sciences in the category of faith, an opinion that we do not share at all, because faith belongs to religion, a passive behavior, and not initiation, which is an active behavior, if we wish to limit the word faith to its essential meaning. Others would define some scientific manifestations as mystical or fideistic, with the resulting consequence that it becomes ever more difficult to navigate and delineate the borders between science and faith. These manifestations, as used in this presentation, should be understood, in a broad sense and as a working hypothesis, to designate a particular state of matter, at the highest degree of attenuation and endowed with intelligence, and that is customarily identified with the name of spirit. A typical aspect of science as we know it today is experimentalism. 7 Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 7th of September, 2019 9:40 am 8 Translators forward. If we wish to define science as all that is realized through experimentation, I don't see why esotericism should be excluded from science. Esotericism has been studied and subjected to the experimental method, as I understand is the case at the various Kremmerzian academies in Europe. The only reason for such an exclusion might be the tendency that for many centuries has driven official science. Here again, we are in need of a qualifying adjective, to negate the existence of the spirit or anything that is intangible, immeasurable with its tools or its methods of inquiry, and which is, on the other hand, the underlying basis for esotericism and esoteric research. The fact that this imponderable escapes detection by certain instruments does not grant us license to affirm that such instruments or methods are the best, or the only ones that can be used. Two fundamental truths are overlooked by all those who use this assumption to negate the existence of any imponderable. The first concerns dimensions or measurements. Take, for example, the measurements that are accepted in the scientific field today, which could be totally arbitrary, because said measurements have been created and used by humans in the context of the human body and the human mind. There is nothing that proves such measurements have the same value in the whole of the universe. There could well be a dimension still unknown to us, but which nevertheless influences our world. The second great truth is that research in the esoteric and spiritual field cannot follow the same beaten path commonly accepted in the scientific field. There are various reasons for this situation, and here I will mention just a few. First of all, today's scientific research has been made possible by the professionalism that accompanies it. Researchers dedicate their lives to research and are sustained by powerful institutions that give them full-time work and salaries, because the results of their research will be commercialized and shared by humanity for its material advancement. Second, in the overwhelming majority of cases, scientific research uses instruments to observe and investigate a series of samples that are external to the researcher himself. The objective method is Hermetic Science of Transformation. In date the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 am Translators forward 9 In fact, the basis of scientific research. Even in those instances where the object of the research is human, it is never the researcher himself, but rather others, who will be examined. Thus he finds himself faced with an irresolvable dilemma, which prevents every chance of complete penetration into the field of the object of research. Third, the successful researcher discovers something, which in most cases is then made available to humanity. This happens because whatever is discovered can be reproduced and provided to anyone who has the means to buy it. Regarding the accuracy of this latter point, doubts may arise for several reasons. Are we sure that all the discoveries of the researchers are known to the whole world? Do we know everything about all the weapons that have been invented so far? Have we been told everything about all the space expeditions? How many other questions can be formulated by us common mortals? Even if research in the esoteric field starts out by rigorously following the scientific experimental method, it cannot coincide with what we've just stated above, mainly because the object of the research is always human. Often the object is the researcher himself and his relationship to the universe of which he is a part, following the Hermetic axiom that in order to understand something, one must become that something. Even when success is achieved, the esoteric researcher does not provide a commercial product, and the outcomes are therefore considered useless for humanity as a whole. The results of such research are not disclosed. This is not for the same reason as those secrets about weapons or space expeditions are not disclosed, but rather due to the skepticism, to put it mildly, with which the results would be received. In fact, research in the esoteric or initiatic field can be carried out for a lifetime and provide great, good, or mediocre results, but these results are always subjective and cannot be objectified into a device or a box of pills readily available to everyone. Who would want to believe, but above all to repeat upon themselves, the experiment before denying its truth or classifying it as impossible solely based upon preconceptions? Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 7th of September 2019 9:40 am. Translators forward or arrogance. Even if someone was willing to try out the experiment upon themselves and had the time to do so in their brief human lives, would the results be the same? The reply: if the scientific method is used, then it can just give one result, is irrelevant and misplaced, because, whichever scientific procedures are used, in order to get equal results, equal quantities and equal qualities must be used, and, as has been demonstrated by Giorgio Picardi, that is not always true, because the same experiment conducted in Australia can provide slightly different results from the one conducted in Italy. What then of humans? Do we respect the same premises of quantity and quality for each person? The reply is all too obvious, especially if we take into account that in objective scientific experiments the subjective intervention of humans is present to a greater or lesser degree, bringing about the non-uniformity of the results. When the principal instrument of decision, measurement, and evaluation is intelligence and human interiority, then the non-uniformity of the results is obvious given the different nature of the start or the finish, independent of the most rigid and rigorous experimentalism. Science has always railed against dogmatism, often rightly so, an aspect to which even esotericists have expressed strong reservations, while admitting it in some cases, as the reader will have chance to discover while reading this first work of this collection. But even science has not always maintained its distance from dogma. For example, the non-transmutability of matter was, until recently, considered a scientific dogma, which is presently undergoing serious revision. The reader will be able to find many other scientific dogmas that were upheld as valid in the past and later proven wrong. Nothing can stop us from wondering if many other universally accepted scientific dogmas would not in the future be overturned, and that future may not be so far off. In fact, as Prentice Mulford stated in the 19th century, it is a fatal error to look at that fragment of the past that we know and use it as an infallible guide for all that could occur in eternity. Therefore, the two types of research, the scientific and the eso-hermetic science of transformation. In 7th of September 2019 9:40 am. Translators forward 11 Teric or initiatic, are equivalent if conducted with the same rigorous experimental method, and the one who does not accord them the same dignity and same utility simply because the results differ, is making a mistake. Moreover, the results cannot help but differ, considering what we previously stated and also considering that at the basis of each type of research there is a somewhat divergent premise or presupposition. Official science takes any kind of phenomenal aspect as law and as such repeatedly examines it. Esotericism, which is here identified as Hermeticism, rejecting a priori the mystical uninformed speeches from many pseudo-initiates or self-styled esotericists, starts from the unity of the law and then sees in the phenomena the multiple manifestations or transformations deriving from that single law. Science examines electricity and studies all the phenomena and applications as ramifications of electricity itself. Esotericism, on the other hand, cannot but consider electricity as a manifestation of the single universal vibration that assumes different aspects that take the names of light, electricity, heat, magnetism, love, and so forth. Science studies human illness as it manifests itself and uses that as the basic law, which not all cases will follow with 100% uniformity. It attempts cure of the symptoms but does not go back, even when based on etiology, to the cause of what started the illness in the first place. Esotericism considers every human being unique, like the universe, and tries to explain the cause of the organism's dysfunction by basing examination not on the phenomenon but rather on the psychophysical unity of the person manifesting the illness. Science intervenes on the physical body to eliminate the symptom. Hermeticism maintains that intervention should take place on the human as a whole through correct use of vital force, the laws of which humans often ignore. Instead they employ vital force not for their wellness but for many other motives, which can weaken their spirit, putting them at risk of things that could otherwise have been avoided. It is also true, and undeniable, that medicine has recently moved closer to the psychosomatic concept, something that Hermeticism has always maintained, and Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 7th of September 2019 9:40 am 12 translators forward upon which various Paracelsians base their treatments. Unfortunately, they are still far from a precise view of this concept because they tend to falsify the value of the psyche, attributing to it a partial function, considering it a funnel that exclusively collects impulses that are generated by external agents. In this way, the historical ego is not taken into account, nor is the presence of our ancestors in us today, which guides the lives of each one of us without us being aware. The only concession that science manages to make to this fundamental concept of Hermeticism is by acknowledging hereditary transmission via DNA, which it has to do, and could not do otherwise, as admitting more would mean recognizing the theory of successive reincarnations. The latter Hermeticism advocates, not on a fideistic basis, but rather on the possibility of individualization of this occult nucleus in each one of us, by means of a lengthy series of experiments and a rigorous research method into the depths of the occult ego, a method not different from the scientific one, because even in the field of science intuition is frequently at the base of discovery, and experimentation follows, and does not precede, this happy intuition. While continuing to partially maintain their positions, today the two contenders, the supporters and opponents of the physical phenomenon that we have called spirit, are slowly coming to a reconciliation. This is a tendency and a need felt and followed not only by Hermeticists but also, and above all, by broader and more open-minded scientists driven, in their research, not by preconceived ideas or dogma, but by a real desire for knowledge. Admittedly, it is only a handful of people on both fronts who have understood that it's time to abandon pre-established themes because truth cannot be one-sided but, as has always been stated, lies somewhere in the middle. Humanity is ready to take a great leap forward, notwithstanding the strong regurgitations of obscurantism that are expressed in various ways. And it is these pioneers who must be leveraged to give everyone the answers that they seek for in vain in the current culture. The aim of this collection is to present the writings of a pioneer Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 7th of September 2019 9:40 am translators forward 13 to persons of goodwill, or who will good, in order to draw out from them, freely illuminated by their own intellect, the conclusions that their personal state of evolution will allow them to attain. To these persons, who pass through this life not to digest but to research, let all our love, esteem, and salutations flow, wishing that they be able to identify what has long been established in their heart to do, and then to bring it to a happy completion. Fernando Picci, 1981. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 7th of September 2019, 9:40 a.m. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 7th of September 2019, 9:40 a.m. Introduction. In presenting to the public this organic collection of Kremmerz's writings that a group of scholars in the field of Hermeticism have compiled in order to allow the reader a concise look at some of the fundamental issues in the vast and complex body of Kremmerian teachings, it was thought opportune to pave the way with some introductory considerations. Parallel to the growing dissemination of scientific knowledge, which contributes, beyond current scholastic education itself, to numerous popularizing publications, to say nothing of the ever greater impact in our lives of the technological advancements that are the direct consequence and application of discoveries in science, we are also witnessing an equally remarkable crescendo of interest in every form of knowledge that is strange, marvelous, and difficult to access, in a word, the occult. There are various reasons that can explain this apparent contradiction. From a more superficial point of view, even if they contain a part of the truth, occultist, or as they are more commonly called today, esoteric, books, which are the object of growing interest, can be set in the framework of science fiction, or in what is called escapist fiction, both of which are widely consumed in our modern industrial societies, a fact that derives from the monotony that results from an existence organized by time. With this in mind, it certainly doesn't happen by chance that various widely published magazines promiscuously dangle, much one Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 7th of September 2019, 9:40 a.m. to introduction to their readers' delight, real occult topics, ancient magical practices, mystical phenomena, and so on, as well as flying saucers, the so-called UFOs, which are indeed the undisputed domain of science fiction. If we go more deeply, however, we can sense that the interest of contemporary man for such topics often seems dictated by the need for new faiths to substitute for the traditional ones that, for one reason or another, are no longer satisfying. This is due in all likelihood to the spread of cults and beliefs, more or less institutionalized, of various merit and content, that range from the cult of aliens, the mystical paroxysm of what is called ufology, up to various mystical churches, oriental or not, to some of which we must also recognize the merit of offering, at least in principle, to their followers a method to verify, by means of experience, the content of the various articles of faith. Finally, if we wish to examine the phenomenon from a more serious and interesting point of view, we must definitely consider the possibility of directly experiencing supersensible realities. In fact, only that can lead us to the heart of the matter that concerns us, to wit, the study of Hermetic sciences. The fact of being familiar with straightforward scientific thinking has certainly, over time, induced in the more mature and knowledgeable modern person an irrepressible requirement to take as certain and accepted only that which can be clearly known by means of direct experience. This requirement, aimed in the beginning only at the phenomena of the physical world, has also ended up being imposed upon those realities generally thought to fall exclusively to religions and that believers are asked to accept as articles of faith. A notable indicator of this changing attitude vis-à-vis supersensible realities was the emergence of parapsychology, which offered to observe, record, and interpret, using a methodology strictly scientific, various paranormal phenomena, telepathy, telekinesis, etc. However, parapsychology approaches the issue only from a limited point of view, insofar as the researcher in this domain remains external to the phenomenon, merely observing what is found in the prognostic or sensitive Hermetic science of transformation. In the 7th of September, 2019, 9:40 a.m. Introduction 3. Subject: who is the object of the experiment, and thereby obtaining only knowledge that is indirect or mediated. Therefore the principles and methods of parapsychology cannot satisfy those more committed researchers who wish to test directly, for themselves, and with the same transparency with which a chemical phenomenon is tested in a laboratory, those alleged supersensible realities proposed as objects of faith by religions. In this respect, it must be emphasized that, if we have clearly recognized this requirement, we have also noticed that it contains another, as a corollary, and that springs from the following simple deduction: if the researcher, at the level of spiritual development he finds himself, in most cases, has no direct perception of the realities he wants to know, then it becomes necessary for him to change his state in order to make possible this perception that was previously forbidden him, as is the case with a more sensitive receiver that can capture more subtle vibrations. We thus see reappearing, because of scientific logic, the old precept of purification or catharsis, that indispensable tool needed to achieve knowledge of divine things. Kremerian teaching satisfies the two postulates required for a conscious and committed spiritual search: a system of doctrines and learned practices that leads those who are qualified for such study to a direct experience of their contents. Moreover, this pronouncement, formulated here as part of such a teaching, is submitted to being personally verified by the student. At this point, however, it is immediately appropriate to dispel some possible illusions that could, if they were not pointed out, over time lead to many bitter disappointments. From the alleged scientific nature of Hermeticism, some could be led to suppose that we are talking about a common discipline that can be learned by simply applying oneself to it like any other branch of knowledge. Nothing could be further from the truth. Instead, one needs to realize that if the invisible world is governed by precise laws, just like the physical world, then we're dealing with laws that are Hermetic science of transformation. In the 7th of September, 2019, 9:40 a.m. for introduction qualitatively different and that can be likened to physical laws only by virtue of an analogical relationship. Said laws, however, can be deciphered and applied only in the aftermath of an active cathartic commitment that involves the entire being of the researcher, who, in addition, must already be, right from the start, possessed of a particularly enlightened and penetrating intellect. The reader himself will see, right from the first page, the truth of what we are affirming, as he comes into contact with the difficult subject matter dealt with by Giuliano Kremmerz, to whom the credit should be given of having carried out the most significant effort of clarification and dissemination ever attempted in this field. Having formed the magisterium of this high knowledge at the end of the last century, Kremmerz actually brought about, using, wherever possible, the ideas and understanding of his time, the translation into a discursive and didactic modern parlance of the synthetic and abstruse foundations of Hermeticism, that is, of that body of sapiential data that has its roots in the ancient cultures of the Eastern Mediterranean and that reached the author through a direct transmission, uninterrupted over the course of centuries. However, every effort to clarify and disseminate such topics, and thus also including what the author accomplished, encounters a deeper limit, for these subjects open wide on two truly limitless horizons, with perspectives that do not lend themselves to closed and complete verbal formulation. There are truths that the researcher must seize for himself, training, as it were, the organs necessary to perceive them, and, consequently, the language one uses to speak of them must perforce be of things symbolic, analogical, elusive. For an example of the intrinsic difficulty of dealing with some truths of the occult, it would be like trying to explain colors to someone who was blind from birth, You can be sure, however, that Kremmerz left nothing out that could be expressed in plain language, placing at the disposal of the researcher the profound depths of his knowledge and facilitating, to the utmost, the intuition of Hermetic truths necessary for the researcher's evolution. Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind for the 7th of September, 2019, 9:40 a.m. Introduction. 5 Naturally, tastes, interests, and the very mentality of today's reader have changed from those of the audience whom Kremmerz addressed, while the scientific legacy we have in our possession has been enriched enormously since his time, so that some aspects of Kremmerzian language belong to an era that is no longer ours. However, the astute reader, able to distinguish what is essential from what is ancillary, will readily see how, on the one hand, none of Kremmerz's statements are opposed to our scientific learning, while, on the other hand, his work of clarification and dissemination retains, even today, its substantial value intact, which now makes it a classic in its field, without however barring the path to further possible formulations. The compilers of this present collection hope that, taking into account the necessary limits inherent in a synthetic presentation, it serves to provide the reader with a useful approach to many essential themes of the vast Kremmerzian teaching, of which, in its doctrinal and practical aspects, the Sir Asterisk is the legitimate custodian. Therefore, the present compendium could be valid as an effective introduction for those, especially younger people, who turn toward these difficult topics, leading them to an understanding that, unlike what unfortunately often happens, offers neither a false promise nor an evanescent mirage, in which case its purpose could be said to have been achieved. Asterisk Sir, Casella Postale 424, Roma Centro Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 5 the 7th of September, 2019, 9:40 a.m. An appeal to aspirants to the light. Asterisk Nothing did I know, I came in, and saw the secret things. Papyrus of New, Canto 116, 15th century BCI. If experimental science, through its gradual conquest of nature's secrets, has made considerable progress in the last 50 years, the knowledge of the divine virtues of the human soul has, by contrast, not advanced a single step. Today, just as before, just as always, in the light of the sun, according to ordinary aspirants to the knowledge of the mysteries of the future, there are only two categories of people, the mystics and the fake doctors who profess theories that are not within reach of all minds. The mystics are legion, from the religious exaggeration of those who talk to God and to the saints, prophets, and archangels, right down to those who evoke the spirits of the dead. The pseudo-doctors are those who, using the methodology of ordinary scientific experimentation, try to talk with a semblance of authority about that thing that everybody possesses and which nobody can. Asterisk published in 1897. 6 Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 6 the 7th of September, 2019, 9:40 a.m. An appeal to aspirants of the light. 7 Explain, namely, the soul within the human creature, rich in virtues and unfathomable mysteries. The mystics speak through psychic ecstasy, and fall under the examination of unbelieving psychiatrists, themselves mystics of an infant science, who classify them as fit for the mental ward and the subjects of experiments intended for a public that never questions the assertions of those regarded as beacons of officially recognized science. Thanks to their linguistic games, magnetism has become hypnotism. The human mind, that is, our faculties of thought and will, has become the psyche, and under that name has become an official subject for medical experiments. But how many of them, who have a conscience, will not confess that, in this struggle against the conquest of the unknown arcana, that they are always hoping for but never arriving at any positive conclusions? Yet the problem of the soul is always the one that is of greatest interest to the masses. Everyone wants to know, everyone ardently longs for some knowledge of what will become of man after his death. The mystery of death is the limit at which the study of human science as it is conceived in clinics and universities stops, but it is also the limit that Hermetic philosophy must take as its starting point to ascertain, if possible, with what tenuousness the material of the thinking ego can withdraw itself from the necessity of bodily functions. If the skeleton is still solid, if the flesh is still young, the cells living, the tissue of the veins flexible, what need is there to go through the grave to remake oneself? You, O death, are the solution to the spiritual enigma within living man and within the hidden depths of his unknown soul. The initiate must vanquish death and go beyond the slavery of the inexorable law. The initiate faces only the problem of the continuity of consciousness, the crossing of the river of forgetfulness, Lethe, continuing uninterrupted his dream of integration with divine powers. Experimental science cannot address the problem, and, in the Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 8 a.m. appeal to aspirants of the light absence of proof accepted by science, it is content to deny that there can be any survival of the soul or of man's psychic individuality. In this way the door to religion and mysticism is opened. Because religion and mysticism offer something that the science of the universities cannot give, the hope of a life that is free, in a world of superhuman justice and ideal liberty, it is desirable that one word unveil the truth. But the problem of the beyond will only be resolved by those who can attain a knowledge of themselves, that is to say, of the structure, anatomy, and chemistry of their own souls. I do not mean to refer here to the investigations of those who, in their books and other writings, have turned out volumes of long-winded psychology purporting to examine our predominant instincts as well as our moral virtues and how to develop them. These investigations are only preliminary researches, and this whole swarm of writers does not really aim to examine the problem of the soul in itself, but only to examine it in relation to the society in which man lives, and to the so-called morality laid down by the society of the living, considered as a condition for success in social life. Science, from astronomy to chemistry, has brought us a great good, the repudiation of all the petty ideas of a universal God made in the image and likeness of man, and thus of the statues, pictures, and symbols embedded in popular tradition. The infinite universe, which is inaccessible to all means of scientific investigation, cannot be represented, even symbolically, as a giant man, since man is the product of the earth, and the earth is only an infinitesimal part of the infinite universe. The only scientific concept of God is this, the law that governs the universe in the most perfect equilibrium. This law is infinite, constant and eternally the same everywhere, on Earth, in intelligent thought, outside of Earth's orbit, in the gravitation of visible worlds, in the moral displacement of souls grouped into society. This law is perfect because it does not allow any violation whatsoever. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In date the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. an appeal to aspirants of the light 9 ever. Thus a miracle that would violate the law is impossible, and apparently it is only possible if it is the result of the law itself, for reasons as yet unknown to man. This law is intelligent because it gives and takes away according to merit, it grants and removes with a justice that is beyond man's capabilities. For us, there is only the universe, with one inexorable law, with an order from which nothing can be taken away. If you want to represent this intelligent and inexorable law in the figure of a man, I beg you not to create an idol as God supreme. The universe is too vast to be embraced in one word or in one human figure. When the ancient patriarchs of the Bible stories spoke of the inexorable figure of Yahweh, Jehovah, who bordered on cruelty and was never capricious, they in fact were making reference to this universal law that directs and creates all that exists, whose soul is the essence of being, namely, the immutable primary substance and secondary and variable form. This immutable law is also understood as the appearance of the universal primary intelligent essence, which springs from the forms of all things, visible and invisible. The ancient priests of classical initiatic religions never used definite forms to represent the primary principle or the intelligent substance, rather, they always used manifold plastic forms to define different moments of the creative act, or rather, the incarnation of the universal God. The greatest conception a zoologist, a physiologist, or a botanist can have of God is to acknowledge nature as the one and only divinity that can be discussed and studied. Now, all the symbols and hieroglyphs of the ancient sages say this: he has two faces, the visible one that represents his manifestation in the physical world, that is, in the nature of our modern materialistic philosophies, and the other invisible, representing the spirit of nature, that is, intelligence, the law of every manifestation of nature, a force, an immense soul that makes the tree blossom, shines through the water, hardens the metal, and shines the sun. Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 9 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 10 a.m. Appeal to aspirants of the light, the invisible God of the universe, whose very manifestations are the positive proof of his existence, is the intelligence that governs all the manifestations that touch our senses. This universal intelligence, invisible God, through the wise constancy of its manifestations, is the regulating law of universal nature. The conquest of powers is no more than the right to obtain them by this law. An athlete who trains all day long in order to be able to lift heavy weights has a right of priority over all the lazier men. A chemist who works away intelligently at the examination of natural bodies has a right of priority over all those who have never in their lives wondered what goes to make up the air. You will not be able, whatever strength you use, to bend metals, but a skilled smith, weaker in bodily strength than you, can bend it at will. This is the right of power. A conquest in the law, not outside the universal law. Anyone who does not understand this is simply mad, because he thinks of power without conquest. Is this concept, then, which is strictly scientific and philosophical, truly a modern conquest? No one has devoted himself to the deep study of the ancient priestly sciences, other than through the symbols and hieroglyphics through which their secular secrets were passed on to us, and the priesthood of Assyro-Babylonian and Egyptian religions had no concept of God but as a law. The priest's secret, their big secret, was the knowledge of the laws of the human soul, through which they managed to acquire marvelous powers that seemed fabulous, but were not. Telepathy, experiments in levitation, accidental divination of things to come through dreams, premonitory signs of things that are about to occur are all things that already attract the attention of recognized science, but inconclusively, because it studies the phenomenon when it arises, like savages' knowledge of eclipses of the sun or moon. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 10 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. An appeal to aspirants of the light. 11 They confirm the obscuring of the sun or moon, and don't explain it, whereas, in cases of intelligent human consciousness, it is necessary, first, to explain the phenomenon, mediumism, telepathy, visions, premonitions, and second, to produce it at will. For this knowledge of the soul to become truly and strictly scientific, it is necessary to study the laws that regulate it and the process by which it produces these phenomena. The subjective method of conscious investigation of one's own ego, sufficient to develop its intensity and reap the rewards, always represents, without fail, the preferable method for those who ardently desire awareness, knowledge, and progress. The goal of the integration is man. Never lose sight of that. Each of your experiments must be done on the man, not on any man, but on you, yourself, and furthermore, you must be conscious of every step forward and know exactly the most apt ways of bringing about a feeling state that is beyond ordinary experience. 2. There exists a secret world that men glimpse, a world whose existence they suspect, whose manifestations surprise them, but that they cannot account for. To study it, we must first study, independently, the secret man who is hidden within us, and second, study the secret, invisible world of souls, of the dead, of divinities, and of the beings that have never been human beings and that live in another life. The secret world, Il Mondo Secreto, will have to contain the entirety of sacred science of the ancient priests, the science that turns man into a living God. Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 11 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 12 a.m. Appeal to aspirants of the light. The secret world will be a work of gnosis to reconstruct the mysterious science of the magicians and will be dedicated to the aspirants to the light, that is, to those who, well balanced in their passions, pure of any harmful intent, strong of will and the will to do good, will devote themselves to study and observation in order to succeed. The elementary parts, which serve to redress the balance of mistaken or badly understood ideas, will be set out in a way that is accessible to everyone. For the rest, I will speak in a way that reserves the knowledge only for that mental and moral aristocracy that has the right to rise. I only promise and maintain this, that I will hide nothing, and the great arcanum will be revealed to you so that candidates for the great priesthood will find the confirmation of their aspirations. Wordy philosophers and scientists with limited lines of research must make way for a rational school of culture that will show the way to the masses, because it marks the limit where the philosopher must unite with the scientist and move toward the conquest of the truth pro salute populi, for the good of the people. To be explicit, this curriculum of facts consists of the effort to better ourselves and others in the knowledge of the individuality latent in us, in applying these achievements to real life to the benefit of those less well provided for, fighting evil in whatever form of ignorance and authoritarianism it takes. The priestly initiatic methods prepared and shaped the etheric human nuclei, the self-formation of intelligent humanity. Our school is making this attempt today. The integration of the powers is subordinated to the state of consciousness that aspires to the potency of a real and profound knowledge. While religions proclaim that these qualities and supernatural powers proceed from the grace given by an unknown God, our school studies scientifically the laws that govern such phenomena, laws well known to certain special priesthoods, the founders of religions. It encourages the virtual powers of the living organism by bringing about, through Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 12 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. an appeal to aspirants of the light. 13 traditional practices, self-discipline, ascesis, in the study of psychophysical powers and the development of the integrated individual, and effectively directing their hermetic therapeutic application to mitigating human suffering. Therefore it is a school of practical philosophy whose disciples have but one aim, to contribute to the development of human civilization, as it is conceived in materialistic form, uniting, among its factors of progress, the elements of the potentiality of the soul and the spirit in all men. Its hermetic mission must be carried out against ignorance and superstition for the benefit of the masses who must be saved by means of the science of man. It is therefore an altar raised to human science and against ignorance. Working humbly and in obscurity for the good, instilling publicly and gloriously everywhere that human science will in time give complete order to human matter, that it will make peace among the peoples of the world and will fight the fear and the sting of death. To atheists, you will say that man is king of humanity and that man's wisdom is queen of the universe. To believers, you will explain that God manifests himself in his creations, as the tree does through its fruits. You will teach everyone that Hermetic perfection is an admirable medicine, which the gods and high deities on Olympus brought to earth, in human guise, among suffering and ferocious men, to heal their weeping wounds and make them peaceful, that Mercury distills the essence of blooming roses and that Eros gives it to mortals if radiant Venus smiles. Giuliano Kremmerz, Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 13 September 2019 9:40 a.m. to the disciples of the great art *Nice, the 1st of June 1917 with a deep sense of bitterness, after about 20 years, I am writing a few words of introduction to this edition of Elementi di Magia Natural e Divina, Elements of Natural and Divine Magic, which my dear friends the publishers have decided to make available to friends and disciples of the great art. In this book, in 1897, I began to write about these antiquated things, which nobody cares about, in a period in which it was so easy to publish a book that found no readers, and here again, 20 years later, under Cassandra's copyright, I write without hope of being believed. I did not publish Il Mondo Secreto to say I am a magician, because one gives up doing that to one's own advantage when one begins to preach to the masses. At the time, I wished to usher in a new period in Italy in the intellectual life of the best who might read my work, by tearing them away from the empty rhetoric of Christian or Buddhist mysticism that has given us the bloody results of the present day, and to disgust them with spiritualist empiricism and the madness of talking with the dead. Preface to the second edition of Il Mondo Secreto, The Secret World, 14 Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 14 September 2019 9:40 a.m. to the disciples of the greater art 15 wanted man to understand the occult or mysterious powers, which are natural to living beings, and which are the unconscious cause of all the mystical inventions that have afflicted mankind for centuries. I wanted to show that between scientific materialism and mysticism from beyond the grave there is an unexplored realm that transforms the uncompromisingly exclusive nature of these two polar extremes, and that the science of man is located in an intermediate state between life and death, which was called mag, and which reveals the unknown and very powerful resources of human nature. I wanted to try out on a large scale the application of these forces to medicine, understood as the art of healing or of alleviating suffering. I wanted to go further, may God forgive me, to erect a monument to Italian Pythagorism, the source of later Templarism, and to initiate a small mental and moral reform of virtue in its practical essence, in social life. I had forgotten the calendar. I thought mankind was many centuries more advanced and, in 20 years, I have only had tastings and tests as results. Nothing concrete, except perhaps for the many troubles I created for myself by my own hands. Now my few introductory words can be reduced to these, that the reader understands, in reading my book, that I wanted to show researchers not the only way to get there, but one way to intuit the existence of a secret, an arcanum, a physical secret, i.e., a natural secret, that very few men have known, and which now even fewer know, and which, even though it is such as to render a man more powerful than any demigod, no one can be found who sells it, and apparently it does not bring happiness to one who owns it. The intuition of the existence of this secret is by itself enough to make laughable the mystical inventions that have enslaved men to pontiffs and divine rights, creating thereby a formalized and mendacious morality that is the cause of the great evils of the present day. Once the old world is freed of its biblical and Buddhist legacy, and when the features and substance of any conventionalism have Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 15 September 2019 9:40 a.m. 16 to the disciples of the greater RTDs appeared, then man, neither through scientific materialism nor through religions that deny any species of initiative, will learn to conceive the hidden divinity of the universe as a benevolent law of liberty in an equilibrium of justice that no human code will ever be able to sanction. Time will be the major factor in this progress whereby all mysteries will be resolved. Volta discovered electricity, but he did not invent it. Electricity existed unknown and inaccessible, its phenomena not understood, for countless thousands of centuries. The future discoverer of this angelic arcanum of living man will not set up limited joint stock companies and will not market its discovery. He will be the Christ King who will bring peace to men of good will. But for that it will take time, the great maker of all miracles, in order that the ideal become reality, and before this discoverer can place the legendary crown of Solomon upon his head, it is necessary that the masses undergo the hard experience of life in further centuries. You may not believe Cassandra, but you will believe her afterward. Do not infer that after 20 years I abide any ambiguity. I shall go further and say, take initiations for what they are. 2 or 3 societies of researchers, who are supposed to possess this arcanum, give no more than an initiation to the neophyte. To initiate means to begin. Initium, beginning. Nobody gives the ending. Because the arcanum is of such a nature that the more closely one glimpses it, the less one can communicate about it. It can be conferred within the limits of certain powers, but never given completely. And what good is it, by the way? Is it perhaps the arcanum of happiness, since it is the great arcanum of a power that causes fear in those who catch a glimpse of it? But it will not be like that when time, the great driver of new realities, will have fixed the hour at which the discovery will be harnessed by Hermetic science of transformation. In 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. to the disciples of the greater RT17 a mature humanity, and if humanity breaks the law when it is replete with good, a historic epoch will then come to an end through one of those cosmic revolutions out of which a future humanity will come to expiate the transgression in a new original sin, or the earth will shatter in space, and the souls, as embryonic dust, will be attracted to new lives in distant spheres. Would not any race, no matter its color, belong to humanities that have lived and completed their cycle? Extinguished, who knows, in mass suicide as a consequence of having disobeyed the law of equilibrium upon which reposes, inexorable, the phallic divinity of eternity. I am speaking like a mystic Saint John the Baptist at Herod's banquets, but these are only theories without curses and without the Hebraic croaking about the apocalypse. Drink water to avoid the intoxications of mysticism. The science of hidden faculties in the human being gives rise to madness, pride, intellectual egocentrism. Think of the deceptions popping up around every corner, in front of those who presume themselves to be exceptional beings, or think they have a right to divinity. Be modest, humble without lowering yourself, Pythagorean in the spirit of your research and in social life. I invite you to the alluring study of the exceptional. Studying is meditating and working, interpreting and testing, it is not dreaming. In the imagination, there lies the danger of fantasy, of obsession, and of bestiality. Read the very few classics of alchemy. Meditate. Alchemy and magic, 2 things that have fallen into disrepute. But it is the 2 words that are disreputable and not the things whose doctrine and experience they encompass. The truths that one can achieve are no more than very deep problems worthy of the interest of evolved minds that are totally free from the well-formed prejudices of the profane schools. The alchemists have presented a problem that has not yet been solved by the official universities. The masters of the School of Alchemy Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 18 to the disciples of the greater RT wait in the shadows, so that the agreeability with which they often announce their mysterious preparations gives birth to the Superman who knows how to adapt the mystery for the good and for the reforming of what exists. Read those books with patience, penetrate the philological meaning of some words, in others appreciate the assonance, in still others the simplest analogy, and do not forget that in those parts that are the least prominent, among the examples borrowed from old wives' tales, some master of the art has given you the recipe ready-made. Remember that before the grand arcanum of the magicians there is the small natural arcanum, which is the key that even a maid might easily use. Patient and humble men of goodwill will find the way. Then they will find the key. For that purpose, this book, ignored by the great multitude of graduates, will be a useful work of introduction. I wrote it with great enthusiasm because I knew I was casting a seed that would bear fruit. I thought it would be soon, but it will be later on when a better man than I will succeed me. I also wrote it because I wanted to try out an immediate application to human medicine. By medicine I mean the art of healing, of curing, and of alleviating people's suffering, medicine in the therapeutic sense. I spent the 20 years between the first and second editions of this book trying to set up a selfless human organization capable of trying a collective experiment, but I have not had the success I imagine will come later. Airplanes were not invented in an hour. The obstacles are immense. Above all, the education of the people. The a priori distrust of the doctors, the sarcasm of senior officials of the state who would like to bring everything into line with an existing bureaucratic system, the religious bad faith of the believers and worshippers, all are stumbling blocks that cannot be demolished in a day. What most people claim to want to see is the miracle. But even when the miracle is right in front of their eyes they do not want to admit it. This is because they want to see it as they themselves and rely Hermetic Science of Transformation. In dating the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. to the disciples of the greater RT19 Gius fables have conceived it, as similar to stage effects in some ballets. And yet much has already been done, while doing little, against the large number of obstacles placed in front of new things and the outside efforts in designing a normal peaceful life. The sciences of the human spirit cut through the tangled subdivisions of many branches of the science of physical man. Biology and physiology are in the vanguard, psychic experiments are part of the advance. But the problem that the science of magic and the mystery that is alchemy address is a secret that reforms and transforms a whole civilization, or a would-be historical civilization that at present makes us slaves to the corollaries of long-winded philosophies. It is a revolutionary arcanum, which is frightening to approach, because its application and its adaptations would upset all those fixed ideas upon which modern society is based. But the first, perhaps the only, side of application for experiment possible in modern society, is occult therapeutics, toward which I have directed various good friends who have followed me. These are practicable experiments within reach of everyone, including medical doctors and those who know the ABCs of human anatomy. They can, by studying the law whose elements I set down, try the experiment. Try, but without speaking. Otherwise people will ask you as they asked me if you are selling imaginary powers, because people who do not reflect do not deny you and me the occult powers of a superior therapeutics, but while they deny this possibility to the human being, they attribute these powers with admirable compunction to a centuries-old image painted on a crumbling wall or to a worthless image carved in the trunk of a tree that has never borne fruit, without considering that the miracles from the images are the miracles of man and of the masses who adore them. I have been told in answer several times that faith is the great heritage of the religious spirit, which can do anything. That is a prejudice. Mysticism is a vicious legacy. There are so many categories, and it grows everywhere like a weed. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 20 to the disciples of the greater RT. There is a mysticism connected to all the aspects of human life, even in the family, next to the hearth or cooked in the soup. A man who can say he is not tarred with this brush is a god among the most perfect. Magic is divine in this sense because it places the adept outside any form of mysticism and makes him the center of a magnetic field of love, the radiance of which eliminates evil, annihilates grief, and scatters suffering. When this focusing center appears, the therapist is created. It is the radiance of love that heals, and this is a medicine that cannot be found on sale in any pharmacy and cannot be manufactured or distilled in any industrial laboratory. In spite of all this, your music remains a forbidden sound in the confusion of songs of all kinds. Human society will stay the same until the coming of Christ the King in the style of Solomon, when love will have statues and receive offerings as there were in the ancient temples, because the ancients were the first to emerge after the disasters of the epoch when the races reached their apogee and were destroyed for having violated their own wisdom. So I have wanted to try a therapeutic experiment, and I invite the disciples of the art to follow the example I have set, a modest example without any mystical belief. The new experiment will teach more than 1,000 volumes could. Do not give yourselves the object of calling 10 acknowledged scientists and recalling to life a man who has been dead 3 days and who is stinking on account of organic decomposition. Do not prevent a sick man from being cured by his medical doctor or from spending the little money he has on medicines. Give yourself the object of healing those who come to you, without even wishing them to know you have done so, and even less without wishing them to thank you. Love them and be wise enough not to desire the impossible. Comfort them with a word and quicken in them with your love that compensating force that in human nature acts as the restorer of the vital equilibrium. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 27th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. to the disciples of the greater RT 21. A patient who is without the equilibrium of the law of matter, with factors that cannot be determined by ordinary chemistry, without any other drug than an imponderable magnet that emanates from us, may come back, is often compelled to come back by the law of physical and psychical compensations, and works the miracle by himself. You will verify it 1,000 times without pride and desire, let it suffice. Let the healing doctor be thanked and let the chemist sell his poisons. This is not your affair. Go on studying, meditating, without believing, that is, beyond the faith in the things that all the world maintains. The Miriam of therapeutists is a wave of love, which emanates from a pulsing center of unknown nature, from a man or from a chain of souls. The allegory may sound mystical, but it has a woman's name, she who was the first and the highest of the magicians, a receptacle, a deep treasure of love, because, do not be scandalized by the truth I am about to tell, because love is matter, like heat, magnetism, light, electricity, radioactivity. Stronger than all these representatives of matter in motion, the element of love will serve as the essential condition of movement toward the enigma of creation and destruction that the mob of mystics foolishly personifies in a spirit and even more foolishly depicts as a man. The enigma is a law. Aim toward knowledge of it. Whatever you do, always do good. To do good means to love. Love through the marvelous distance of the spheres, beyond the vision of matter that becomes corrupted and transformed. From distant worlds call back souls and the generative influences of the astral current, the great serpent of the Jewish Kabbalists, from the beloved soul drive out any cause of corruption by destroying the negative elements that would change it. Consider that any nature in equilibrium, any animal organism, from the tiniest to the most advanced, tends to die because it is born with the instinct for eternal transformation through the law of love. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 21 the 7th of September 2019 9:40 a.m. 22 to the disciples of the greater art, love and death are the two factors of life. By loving you will hold off the pain of death, beyond which the unloved soul experiences the sensual delight of regeneration through love. Dante repeats it in mysterious words here and there, and Leopardi sang it as in an aura of transport and desire. You will soon understand the secret of the regenerative Miriam, as soon as you learn to love. Only then will you be able to tell me if I have written this book inspired by the highest affection for those who read it, without judging me in advance, and with the deepest gratitude to those who, after having read it, become good, selflessly devoted solely to the cause of good, which in the future will unite men, peoples, nations as brothers and make the earth a place of love and peace. Giuliano Kremmerz, Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 22 the 7th of September 2019 9:40 a.m. Part 1 Introduction to the Science of the Occult. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 23 the 7th of September 2019 9:40 a.m. 24 Introduction to the Science of the Occult. Science is for those who conquer it. What need is there today of the occult? For today, what lurks in the shadows is dreadful: criminality, falsehood, deceit. All that we know as science does not hide in a temple and say I fear the light. The knowledge of each new truth is like a stream that increases the ocean of achievements that contribute to human well-being. Do you know something that others do not? Publish a book and explain yourself. Thus, I have decided to write in order to make myself understood and to teach so as to help others succeed. I will speak and write clearly. As for you, to understand me correctly, you should only do with scrupulous fidelity all that is necessary for you to succeed and enable you to clearly understand all that I write. You should speak as little as possible, not argue about a particular phenomenon, and not say, as the ignorant do, I have not seen it, therefore it is not true. One must study, keep silent, and wait. One must understand things well and experiment carefully. If the experiment fails, do not say, the master is insane. Simply say that you have not understood, and try again. Science is every man's bread. Science has been democratized to the point of making chemists of children. But men with common sense understand that, so far, neither integral nor infinitesimal calculus has become popular. And since the highest reason of occult science is the algebra of elementary philosophy, the sublime mathematics in its application to the reality of existing things, I will not be held culpable for obscurantism if minds that are unprepared for calculating do not succeed in grasping abstractions on the fly. For my part, for those things nature permits, I will keep things down to earth, so that those with the least experience may easily understand. But since I also have to indicate the way to those who can see further, who are permitted to see more elevated things, I apologize if I Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 24 the 7th of September 2019 9:40 a.m. Introduction to the Science of the Occult. 25 Resort to ideas that are beyond the range of short-sighted birdwatchers. This book is written for the many who want to prepare themselves and for the few who can fully digest it. Science is given to everyone, but only fully to the one who conquers it. Magic, the magician, and the uncommunicable secret. Have you got a clear idea of magic and the magician? Magic is absolute wisdom, which means that it is the synthesis of all that is, was, and will be. It is a word that covers all the attributes of divine omnipotence, if by God you mean the supreme intelligence who creates, regulates, and preserves the universe. Magic is, as an ideally perfect science, applicable and practicable, 1 in religion, governance of collective consciences. 2 in politics, governance of national interests. 3 in families, the ethical and moral foundation of the state. For in man, the enigmatic sphinx of the common learned person, the magician is the one who possesses the science of God, is its living repository, and who uses it. This science is so powerful that it causes those who have become master of the divine secret to lose any desire to speak of it. In fact, those who have reached the goal have done all they could not to write the truth except in a form that is almost unintelligible even to those who had some intuitive understanding of it. Magia in Greek, from which the word magic is derived, is an alteration of the word mag, which, in ancient Persian, means highest and most wise priest. Dr. In course gives this definition of magic. Magic, considered as a science, is the knowledge of the trinitary formation in nature and man and of the way by which omniscience of the spirit and its control over the forces of nature can be reached by the individual while he is still in his body. Considered as an art, magic is the application of this knowledge to practice. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 25 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 26 Introduction to the Science of the Occult. Just think, in fact, that ancient priests imparted this science in the temples to all those who became worthy of learning and practicing it after long and terrible trials, and it was given by degrees in rites and ceremonies that our Catholic Church has preserved in the holy orders. Hence one can argue that those who taught this terrible science and knew its importance looked for qualities that a common man does not possess. Just imagine for a moment that your children were to ask you for a loaded pistol, taking it for a toy. Could you give them such a dangerous device without neglecting the duties of a father toward his children and of a man toward mankind? You would only give a weapon to your children on the day you are sure they will use it to save their lives, not to injure you or themselves. The Master conducted the education of the profane to its end, slowly leading the neophyte to the priesthood. The highest priest was the adept, that is, the one who had reached the highest wisdom, the magician. Christ summed up all of magical preparation in love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Those who practice these two precepts wholeheartedly and can keep their own counsel are ready to start. Perfect rectitude of heart, a clear notion of what is good, a total aversion to the creation of what is bad, a great love for your fellow man, a conscience clear of any stain, no desire that is not for the good of others, no fear of the evil that may strike you while doing good. That is how the magician is like the saint and is worthy of that great idea of good that is God. Eliphaz Levi wrote, "There is a great secret whose revelation has already destroyed a world, as is proved by the religious traditions of Egypt summed up symbolically by Moses at the beginning of Genesis. This secret constitutes the science of good and evil, and the result, when it is divulged, is death. Moses symbolizes it as a tree, which is in the center of earthly paradise, and which is close to and rooted to the tree of life, which Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 26 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. Introduction to the Science of the Occult. 27 is protected by the flaming sword, and the four forms of the biblical Sphinx, the cherub of Ezekiel. Yes, there exists a unique, universal, sempiternal dogma, as strong as supreme reason, as simple as all that is great, intelligible as all that is universal, and absolutely true, and this dogma was the father of all the others. Yes. There exists a science that gives one powers that seem to be superhuman. Now, if this terrible secret exists, is it not to a saint that it should be confided? The universe and man in the occult doctrine. In order to understand well and clearly all that has been written on the occult sciences, magic, and so on, one must understand what lies at the basis of the theory and practice of magic. In magic, the concept of the universe is the synthesis of all that exists. All that exists is a unity, a synthesis of three essential elements: matter, life, and energy. the great synthesis is completely analogous in its parts. If you go up a mountain where no blade of grass can be found, and no birds sing, do you think you are alone? You, the stones, the air you breathe, the stars above, are all one in one universe. Take your own human reason, enlarge it into the world's reason, and you will acquire the sense of the world's reason. Your soul is the soul of the world. From this notion astrology was born, the word, or logos, of the stars. Hermes says in his Smaragdine tablet that all that is above is like all that is below, and to know this is enough to work the miracle of one thing. Dogmit Ritual de la Haute Magie, The Doctrine and Ritual of High Magic, 1854-56. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 27 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 28 Introduction to the Science of the Occult. Study man and you will know the universe, study the universe and you will know man. From the universe come down to man and apply to him the laws of the universe. From man go back up to the universe and discover the occult laws there. Man has a soul, thought, a direction, a purpose, so does the universe. The universe has motion, breath, evolution, return, so does man. Everything is an analog, and the magical process par excellence is analogy. Even the sacred symbol, which attempts are made to explain through likenesses, is analogical, so too is the law of miracles and of magic procedures, and the study of analogy leads to the knowledge of magic or the wisdom of Solomon. The vital stream is a single one. The process of evolution and involution of action in universal life is a constant one. This force or vital current transforms itself according to the medium it nourishes and gives life to, and acquires a new form. Papus wrote, "Everything is analogical, the law that governs the world also governs the life of an insect." To study the manner in which cells gather to form an organ is to study the way in which the kingdoms of nature gather to form the earth, an organ of our universe. It is the way of studying how men gather to form a family, an organ of mankind. To study the formation of a device through its parts is analogous to learning about the formation of a world from planets and of a nation from families, or further to learning about the constitution of the universe starting from the worlds and of mankind from the nations. Everything is analogous. Knowing the secret of the cell means knowing the secret of God. The Absolute is everywhere, the wholeness is indivisible in its whole and in its parts. From what goes before, it is clear that the definition of life, which seems easy at first glance, is much more general than is usually Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 28 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. Introduction to the Science of the Occult. 29 Thought. For mankind, life is the organ regenerating force carried by the blood corpuscles, but this actually is human life, not life. In fact, this force is only a modification of the air that includes the life of all beings on Earth. If one wants, as most contemporary scientists do, to identify the origin of life in Earth's atmosphere, one can stop there. But Earth's atmosphere, like human blood, takes its life-giving principles from above, from the sun itself. We can thus get back to the infinite. But since our general scientific knowledge is limited to our world, we cannot go any further, and as we realize that the force of the blood comes from the air, the force of the air from the earth, and earth's force from the sun, we say that life is transformed solar force. From what I have said, the analogical understanding of anything that changes in universal life becomes clear. Let us now pass on to man, who interests us particularly. For some, man is matter, for others, theologians, he is matter and spirit. For the science of magicians he is the reflection of the life of the universe and therefore tripartite in his formation, body, plastic medium or astral body, and soul. The astral body can consciously go outside the physical body, as with adepts or perfect initiates, magicians, or it can go unconsciously and consequently undergo the chance influences of the moment, wandering spirits, as is the case with any medium. When the body breaks into pieces or shatters, the astral body takes flight, and man dies. If a man imposes his astral body on the astral body of another, he magnetizes him. As I wish to set the foundations of what occultism teaches, for a clear understanding of all that I will choose and publish, I will not here go into an analytical examination of the elements that go to make up man in the formation of his astral body. Trait méthodique de sciences occultes, a systematic study of the occult sciences, 1891. Trans. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 29 7 September, 2019 9:40 am 30 Introduction to the Science of the Occult Spiritualism. When I presented to the public, as an introduction to what we would subsequently publish, the new material, definitions, and opinions on occult sciences, I did not mean to write a book of spiritualist propaganda, quite the contrary. I intended to present a completely encyclopedic overview of the mystery as it is understood in magic, as the highest point of human and divine wisdom, the key to the occult temple of nature, in which man comes closest to God, both in his conception and in his realization. Modern history will begin when a new type of chemistry analyzes the elements of the soul that make up the individual person and causes them to unfold, and this will mark the end of a long period of darkness in which man has not known himself. The occult sciences include spiritualism as well as animal magnetism and theurgy, though spiritualism is the one and only domain, after animal magnetism, which interests those who recognize neither wisdom nor truth beyond the limits of their understanding and authority. A French educator, Rivail, under the name of Allan Kardec, gave the first great impetus to the popularity of spiritualism, which, through successful publicity, spread everywhere that there were people who wished to talk with the soul of a dead person, or the curious who take pleasure in seeing a table move. One could say that magic, a terrible word, frightful, suspicious, had been quite forgotten in the face of this fashionable success, which does not strike fearful consciences as hard as the mother of all human wisdom. Spiritualism has been fortunate and successful because it is more suited to the common level of intelligence and closer to the doctrine of the Catholic Church militant, because of its idealist conception of the soul, of the spirits of the dead, and of the guardian angel. Spiritualism teaches that man is made up of three quite distinct parts. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 30 September 2019 9:40 am Introduction to the Science of the Occult 31:1. The physical body. 2. The spirit. 3. The perispirit, which marks the link between body and spirit. This perispirit accompanies man's spirit after the death of the physical body. The spirit, or human soul, tends toward never-ending improvement through successive reincarnations. Between two successive incarnations, souls stay in interplanetary space and can communicate with the living. A medium is the person who acts as a means of communication between the spirit of the dead person, not yet reincarnated, and the living. By means of mediums, the spirits can produce phenomena of all kinds, mental, sensible, and physical. In short, the medium is a being who, because of his privileged constitution, is chosen by the spirits for their manifestations. Those who practice Kardec's spiritualism classify mediums according to their disposition and the quality of the manifestations. Without going into the theory of spiritualism, it is foolish not to acknowledge spiritualistic phenomena or phenomena derived from spiritualistic practices. It is certain that even those best at academic discussion and most incredulous regarding certain material and sensible phenomena have not been able to deny or confute everything. Nevertheless, the suspicion of cheating, deceit, and of bad faith should lead the teaching back to the ground of experiments that are strictly scientific and irrefutable. Recognized official science, as its knowledge progresses, rejects the old designations for forces and phenomena, and gives both new names. The ectenic force of Professor Thury of Geneva is a way of being and perceiving the astral or fluidic body of the occultists, similar to the psychic force suggested by Cox. So, I planned to speak of animal magnetism, after all I have said before, to call the attention of researchers to hypnotism. Wise Europe, Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 31 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 am 32 Introduction to the Science of the Occult, which dictates the way the scientific winds will blow, did not want to accept, as far back as the 18th century, the experiments of Mesmer and disputed those of Dupotet, Guisga, and the others of the first half of our century, only to be then triumphantly convinced by Charcot and his Salpêtrière experiments, which gave hypnotism to medical science militant, and with it a way of understanding animal magnetism. Official science admits that in man there is a force, hypnotic, psychic, ectenic, but does not determine or accept the idea that this force is constantly set in motion by an intelligence outside the active operating subject. In effect, it admits the potentiality of this force, but excludes the mediumship, that is, it denies the intervention of an intelligent spirit or intelligent entity outside the purely physical or natural forces of the operator. Let us then begin by not despising the occult and by admitting the existence of a force in man that is not apparent but is capable of increasing his potential, and let us pass from known experiments to much more complex applications, which belong to the domain of secret traditional science, secret for unknown reasons, but which perhaps those who today violently oppose this terrible word would keep if they realized what great effects this force can have when mastered by one who has the true key to it. In short, then, the science of our universities, by only acknowledging the existence of a force different from those already known, can no longer cast in doubt this or that affirmation of occultism. Crookes answered Balfour's criticism by saying that electrobiological force might have captivated him and his friends, but not the mechanical devices that had recorded the phenomena. Well, can scientists swear that the force that fascinates, and the one that moves the control devices of the experiments, are not one and the same? And if this were the case, would not the whole edifice of mechanical experimentalism crumble? And would it not be better to refrain from planting in weak minds an atrocious doubt that, although it is part of a very high arcanum of Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 32 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 am Introduction to the Science of the Occult 33 The Secret Philosophy of the Magicians, I do not dare formulate for fear of doing irreparable damage. Consider dispassionately the demonstration of facts and evidence and judge calmly, with accuracy and mathematical precision, and tell me where the experiments started by contemporary scientists can bring us. All that has been said until now is only the introduction to fakiric magic *, the exercises of the astral body, as body and force, as guiding potential, active by itself, which can reach limits unsuspected by most men, but it is old hat for occultism, which the ancients knew and practiced better than us. Their initiatic schools were operating schools, at that time they did more and talked less. But we will come back at the end of this introduction to the subject of magic beyond forces, in the field of intelligences. Let me state that the title I preferred for this work of teaching is Introduction to the Science of the Magicians, not only because magic is the most proper word for synthetic science, but also on account of the misuse that has been made in the contemporary world of such words as occult, occultism, theosophy, and so on. I do not want to go into this misuse, and call all the attention of the reader to the worth and substance of spiritualism. A true religion for the souls of the dead, as a moral doctrine, is purely and ideally Christian, with the exception of the notion of successive incarnations. It establishes the tripartite formation of man made up of a body, of an envelope or second fluidic body or perispirit, and a soul. It affirms the disappearance of the body at death, the continuation of the fluidic body together with the soul. It states that man can develop a special sensitivity that lets the spirits *Farkas, followers of Brahmanism, who use all their occult powers to produce amazing phenomena. Priests make use of them in the temples to inspire the faithful. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 33 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 34 Introduction to the Science of the Occult of the Dead manifest themselves in one way or another, mediumism. This, in a few words, is the whole doctrine of the spiritualists. A table turns, a bell flies, a pen moves in a medium's hand, this is indisputable. But how the table turns, how the bell flies, how the pen moves, this is the mystery. The outside observer says, it is psychical force, it is magnetism, it is radiating nervous force, it is electrobiological force, unconscious automation. The spiritualist, on the other hand, believes that it is all the work of spirits who want to manifest themselves to men. The ancient occult science, the science of magicians, of which the evocation of the dead or necromancy is one of the most frightening parts forbidden to neophytes, agrees with the former and not the latter. Not because the communication of a spirit with a living person cannot take place sometimes, but because generally this does not happen. Always consider yourself as a unity under the Trinitary law, like the universe, with a mental function, intelligence, spirit, a material form, body, and an activity proceeding from these factors, between the two natures, material and mental, perispirit. This leads to the consequence that death does not separate the physical body from an intelligent invisible body, and therefore, there are no spirits of the dead. So the real calling up of the dead is impossible, and neither is there mental evocation in the commonly understood sense. The mistake of the present-day propagandists for the occult is their rush to instill in the public at large the principle of ancient sacred science, forgetting that science, see above, is the bread of all but wholly open only to those who conquer it. The masses have religions. Christianity, in its essence, is the religion par excellence, with which spiritualistic doctrine cannot, either as a religion or as a heresy, contend. So what does spiritualism do? Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 34 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. Introduction to the Science of the Occult. 35 Two things. If it produces phenomena, it calls the attention of outside observers to the latent powers of the human organism, contributing to human progress, and accomplishes its mission because it passes from the parlors of innocent entertainment to the universities. If, on the other hand, it does not make chairs jump and bells ring, and it seeks to bring about a conversation with a spirit that has been called up, and that never gives proof of its own identity, then it accomplishes its mission of making intelligent people wonder whether there cannot be a less equivocal means of finding the truth, and thus prepares neophytes for the science of the magicians. The first mission is accomplished. Without spiritualism, psychic phenomena would not be discussed today, but the second is not, because it is difficult to convince those who have gotten a taste for talking with the spirit of the Virgin Mary that they are mad. Magic is the supreme science, the highest reason of the existing and the possible, the law of the sublime and hidden mathematics of the entire sensible universe, and the magician has to combine the purity of a saint with all the science and clairvoyance of a reasoning man. In addition, even in the explication of the unitary doctrine, spiritualism is rudimentary. The concept of the universe as a unity leads in magic to the principle of unity of force and unity of matter that some superior intellects have already glimpsed, in their studies, outside of the teaching of magic. In this case, magic, which no progress of vulgar science will ever be able to find fault with, identifies many modes of existence of the one force of the one matter that begins with the metal and, from liquid to gas, passes to infinitesimal attenuations. Now, spiritualism admits of an indeterminate fluid outside inhabited worlds in which swim and walk many generations of spirits. See Ovid. This is the basis of alchemy, which its few researchers believe to be rudimentary chemistry, whereas it is, in fact, the philosophy of chemistry. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 35 the 7th of September 2019 9:40 am 36 Introduction to the Science of the Occult in their pure spirit who think of nothing but coming reincarnation. This is in agreement with neither reason, which is science *, nor with the traditional dogma of the magicians, nor with religion. Therefore spiritualism is anti-scientific, anti-traditional, anti-religious. Magic teaches instead the unity of force and of the matter in the vital or astral current, the great serpent of transformation in which, like on a very sensitive photographic plate, the smallest oscillation of a thought generates a form. The pure spirit, according to the spiritualists, accompanies the soul of man after death and persists, while according to magic the intelligent divine principle tends to progressive attenuation, until it is assimilated in God. This is the nirvana of Hinduism. In space, where the spiritualists place the spirits of the more or less perfect dead, science places all the fluidic forms, all the coagulations of the fluid of universal life, the spirits of the dead, the astral bodies of the mediums and wandering initiates, the elemental spirits or spirits of the elements, human conceptions, the lemurs, the larvae, and all sinful and incomplete creations. Science is light and reason. Astral light. There exists in nature a force that is more powerful than steam. A man who became master of it could change the world. This force was known to the ancients. It resides in a universal agent whose supreme law is equilibrium, Eliphas Levi. This agent, a first manifestation of which is magnetic force, constitutes the materia prima of the great work of the initiates of the Middle Ages. It is the protoplasm of the universe, the azoth of the alchemists, the universal pollen. The French occultists, of whom Dr. Papus is the learned interpreter, use elementaire, to mean the spirit of man after death, or better, the fluidic remains of man after the ultimate journey, and elementals to mean the instinctive and mortal beings between the physical and intellectual worlds. They are spirits or souls of the elements capable of good and evil according to the will that guides and dominates them. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 36 the 7th of September 2019 9:40 am Introduction to the Science of the Occult. 37 The astral light, says Eliphas Levi, is full of souls, which it liberates, in the continuous generation of beings. These souls have imperfect wills that can be subdued and put to use by more powerful wills. They then form great invisible chains and can give rise to and determine great commotions of the elements. In the Latin forms used by the occultists of the past centuries, as is the case in our initiatic teachings, in Italian, we do not use elementary to mean the former and elemental to mean the latter. Our ancient and usual word is spirit, from the Latin spiritus, breath exhaled by the Creator, breath of life and love. So, while we call the former spirits of men, we call the latter spirits of the elements or elementals, which are creations inferior to man and more imperfect. But this is the perfectibility or not of form and force, instead the intelligent principles which the ancient Kabbalah * interprets continue the series of the progression of intelligences as far as the divine unity. Except that this is not enough, and the spiritualists would like to know how the magician sees, how he operates, how he enters the astral realm. First of all, by reasoning. Reason is the first torch that brings us closer to truth. Second, by not deluding oneself. Finally, by forcing oneself not to speak, being without any pride, and without casting pearls before swine. In conclusion, they have mouths, but they speak not, eyes have they, but they see not, they have ears, but they hear not. The Kabbalists are the occultists of the Western Jewish tradition. The foundation of their philosophy is the Kabbalah, the framework of absolute ideas in nature, the teaching of which was traditional from master to disciple. Curious phrases that suggest that those who use them get entangled in 1,000 inaccuracies, even of rudimentary ideas concerning magical practice. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 37 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 38 Introduction to the Science of the Occult. Noses have they, but they smell not, they have hands, but they handle not, feet have they, but they walk not. Psalm 115. Dearest friends, in this didactic introduction I have put together in logical order the complex of definitions, opinions, and teachings that can better help the understanding of all, and that I will publish in this anthology. Summing up, I have wanted to make a clear distinction between two things that the mob mixes up. One, the pseudo-intelligent physical phenomena that the human organism, soul and pure spirit, can produce under certain conditions of the nervous system. This is called spiritualism. 2. Absolute, universal wisdom, the key to all sciences, which no human progress will ever find fault with. Absolute wisdom, which has the key to all that exists, which tends to develop the divine faculties in man, and which links him with the gods, who are neither spirits of the dead nor miscarriages of terrestrial life, nor elements of the universal life. This is called magic. Logically, magic includes spiritualism, magnetism, astrology, alchemy, and all the known varieties of the manifestations of the occult forces in man and matter. But at the same time, magic includes a higher philosophy and an occult philosophic practice, which gives the jumping-off point, for those who understand it best and can master it, to leave the world of the phenomena of matter and enter the world of divine unity. In this second part, magic is divine wisdom, and the magician who has attained it no longer belongs to this world of suffering and illusions. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 38 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. Introduction to the Science of the Occult. 39 And as long as very arcane reasons make him walk in the human mud, only his physical body belongs to the earth, his self. His intelligent individuality lives in that heaven of sublime truth, to which Dante and the Neoplatonists of his time alluded in the symbolism of light, preparing himself, praying and waiting to be God. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 39 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 40 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. Part 2 Elements of Natural and Divine Magic. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 41 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 42 Elements of Natural and Divine Magic. Unus, Polyntisimus Omnium, O Son, Radiant God, our Father, you who create forms and give through shade relief to visible things in the wave of your eternal splendor, illuminate with your divine light the one who, pure of mind and heart, reads in this book the laws and practices to rise to the power of the gods. Let him understand and not misunderstand. Give him the humility of knowing he is ignorant and the virtue to rise above the visibility of earthly life, so that where the voice of the beast seduces him not, he may feel the breath of your fertile spirit. O Son, you who sweep the darkness of the great night of passionate phantoms, of the ghosts of the most uncontrolled desires, of the proud creations of human arrogance, illumine the ignorance of the one who, purged of the influences of the voluptuousness of temporal things, is thirsty for the eternal truths, and let the idolater of the beast, bound to the vainglory of ignorance, feel your divine ray and prepare himself for the advent of Christ. O Sun, shining God, forgive those who read me in bad faith, quackish or blind priests, the doctors of theology who cannot make out the word of your spirit, learned adorers of carbolic acid, of microbes, of serums, the critics who do not know, the bigots who are afraid. Let your messengers of light, winged angels and horned demons convert them to the understanding of the truth of invisible things. But you who hide your light only from the blind, O Sun, do not deny your ray and providence to the one who, reading without virtue of soul and heart, wants one single proof to be converted to truth. But if the proof is not enough and the tempter of the gods obstinately makes another attempt without faith, be as clement as you are magnificent. Forgive the frailty of the presumptuous. Let not your red fiend excite his blood, and let not his brain erupt with madness at the wandering, fleeting images of lust for the non-existent. Forgive, O Sun, and check your terrible anger against ill-intentioned *. 1. Strongest of all. Ed. Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 42 7 September 2019 9:40 AM. Elements of Natural and Divine Magic. 43 Sophists and the Minstrels of Human Wisdom. While they deny, the cock crows, and the dawn of the light of the souls, of the intelligences, breaks in the east, above the very high mountain peaks which hide the city of God from the human eye. While they mock what they cannot see, they caress the sheep, which are about to be sheared, and the fat thrushes, which are about to be plucked, look for the paper money and the paradise of the slums. Meantime the cock crows again, dawn becomes sunrise, the world awakens to the light and leaves the owls, mistresses of the long night, in their nests to peck at the corpse of the great lie that fed them last evening. To those who believe, who love, who hope, goes the true sense of my word, which is your law. Preparation. If, after reading the introduction in which I have condensed, with broad strokes, all that has been said and written on this problem of the incredible, you have decided to continue reading what I promised, I warn you that from now on I believe I have the right to consider you my disciple. And as my disciple I warn you that if you want to enter the world, which the others cannot find, you must not believe illusions, the prejudices of your vulgar conscience, and though the nice profane paintings are seductive in their variety of colors, prepare to see around you the illusions of habits disappear and to see where the others only find the blackness of darkness. The effort of all human intelligence is toward grasping the secret of God, and hence the hodgepodge of profane sciences from astronomy to analytic chemistry, from metaphysics to speculations on microbes, from experimental physics to the physiology of the nervous system, and from embryological sciences to all other sciences, infinite in number, which, newborn or about to be born, seem to be the last word of truth, while they are in effect no more than suspension. Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 43 7 September 2019 9:40 AM. 44 Elements of Natural and Divine Magic. Points in the blindness of the great human mass attempting to climb Olympus. So, since time began, humanity has been divided into two distinct classes: the simple, who, unaware, recall the world before human malice, and the cunning, who deny everything so as not to be classified among the fools. The former have faith as a companion, the latter, fear of being deceived. They are the extremes whose mean term is represented by the enlightened ones who were and are always present in all countries, all races, all times, to act in the darkness of the human journey as a torch for the wave of creatures who amid vainglory, spasms, and impotence, are on their way to fill the cemeteries full of bones, where vanity erects mausoleums that seem eternal and are in the view of eternity only a flash of light. the seers, the enlightened, the initiates of all times have preached and preached that, if the mob of the imperfect is allowed the sweet hope of faith, doctors are not allowed to pretend to be Christ's judges, wanting to treat divine manifestations with the same method Galvani used to deal with frogs. And in this work, once more, I warn these false men of wisdom, whose genius has been diverted by profane doctrines, that the knowledge of Jove cannot be considered as a toy and an object of human vanity. Hermes, in the ancient magic aphorisms, Patrimony of Eternal Divine Revelation, teaches that to be familiar with a dog it is necessary to change oneself into a dog, an aphorism or mysterious dogma that must be interpreted literally. You will become a god, an angel, a demon or devil, if you seek the friendship of gods, angels, or devils, and in order to have a relationship with the souls of the dead, you need to live the life of the dead. In this lies all the practice and doctrine necessary to enter the invisible. Those who do not have the courage to abandon their worldly illusions and put intellect above all fleeting and deluding sensations of matter, those who, even if they declare themselves strong men with very pure hearts, cannot master the pleasure and pain of human nature. Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 44 the 7th of September 2019 9:40 a.m. Elements of Natural and Divine Magic 45 They must renounce the world in which the purest and most perfect beings have the understanding of truth. The ancient schools of initiation, from the Chaldeans to the Egyptians, and from the latter to the Templars and their heirs, did not accept a disciple without testing his courage and faith. I mean trial by fire, resistance to the temptation of desire, the courage not to quail before frightful apparitions. I am sure you would win the prize despite everything. That was the nightmare of the priests in days of old. But there is a monster you must defeat before you knock at the door of the occult. This ogre of conscious youth is called public opinion. You are not afraid of monsters, of fire, of the elements, but you, as a result of the false social upbringing of our times, may be afraid of what people will think of you if they find you with your nose in a madhouse book, or indulging in madman's habits. That is the fatal moment. If you are insensible to the scorn of the mob, if between the well-defined equilibrium of reason and the words of the people who mock you, you are strong enough to separate yourself from the world, you will begin to be, you begin to live your own life, you begin the victory over the numerical majority of illusions, and you will see that the picture changes as soon as your genius touches your forehead and shows the mob that you are superior to vulgar nature. You will see the people who mocked and laughed at you come and ask you for a response or a prescription to avoid a catastrophe. The only check on the actions of the disciple must be the reason of freedom, the balanced judgment that gives the intuition of the perfectibility of the human spirit. After the opinion of the mob you might be cooled down by the doubt that your Christian conscience may not clash with the studies that you have freely started. I assure you I will always keep in harmony with the Christian authors who have written about these things of ours, and which the Church of Rome has neither excommunicated nor prescribed. I refer to Johannes Trithemius, Benedictine, Abbot of Verburg, the Jesuit Father Kircher, Raymond Lully, that sublime Dr. St. Thomas Aquinas, and others who will be very suitable to illustrate my argument. Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 45 the 7th of September 2019 9:40 a.m. 46 Elements of Natural and Divine Magic. The brain of man is a sanctuary that reflects in absolute logic all the splendor of divine reason when it is not shaken by the congestion of human passions. The Abbot Trithemius in his Steganographia gives the prescription necessary in order to enter into the occult. One must be endowed with all the virtues, have a clear conscience, desire good in the name of God, for oneself and others. One must not tend toward base things or actions. Good attracts good both in the visible and in the invisible world. In human society affinities of character, of culture, of education, of tendencies, of passion bring men together in groups. In the invisible world the same law applies. At the level of intellectual synthesis, all men are equal, just as all flowers are flowers, but a chrysanthemum is not a poppy and a white lily is not a red rose. There are men who are gods and others who are beasts. Civilization makes them brothers because the divine law aims toward the redemption of lower natures, the evolution of matter and souls toward eternal light. Even we, who practice most fully love toward our neighbors, do not approach people we find repugnant. Therefore all the preparations for priesthood of all times have the same prescription, and Christianity goes hand in hand with operant magic. Dharmistätter * mentions the Asher of the Parsis, so dear to almost, Ahura Mazda, indeed characteristic of the divine world. The Asher for the Parsi is purity and contains three elements: good thoughts, good deeds, good words. I call your attention to one thing that has to be clarified: the difference between religion and magic, between saint and magician. Religion is the entirety of a whole sacred doctrine, fit to be understood by the masses. If it has a true, deep, scientific origin, it speaks to the mob under the guise of divine precepts and admonitions. It personifies divinity and speaks a relative morality to the progress of the masses. Dharmistätter, Ormistit Ahriman, Paris, 1877. Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 46, the 7th of September, 2019, 9:40 a.m. Elements of Natural and Divine Magic. 47 Magic, Wisdom and Teaching about what exists, the synthesis of the laws of created things, the process of creation itself in the order of truth and nature, is the key to all the traditional religions. Both the religious man and the disciple of magic look for knowledge of the divine world, the former passively by applying religious precepts, the latter actively by trying to force human nature and enter into the invisible world, to discover the laws and use them as masters would for the conquest of divine powers. The religious man may become a saint. The disciple of magic must either become a magician or disappear. Sanctity is a virtue of the initiate, not his purpose. The magician's purpose is divine integrity with its superhuman virtues. The saint may come to grace, the magician must accomplish divine actions. The former does not need science, the latter cannot exist without science. A pious friar, after a long life of self-denial and prayer, rejoices in the stigmata of the crucifixion. A scientist must be able to explain that which is the cause of these stigmata. The pious friar has no desire, he is at the mercy of God's grace and is made an instrument of it. He heals the sick, predicts a joy, he comes to the aid of the needy when he is least expected. The magician, according to his powers, must give and perform whenever he wants to and whenever he has to use his wisdom, his power, the forces at his disposal. Sanctity is obtained, magic is conquered. Chainit in his study on Pythagorean philosophy says, all the rules of Pythagorean life can be summed up in this great maxim: first become a man, then a god, unite yourself in close relationship with God, follow and imitate God. But this did not refer only to Pythagorism. The neophyte of the earliest Christian rites wore white, as a sign of candor, in the original sense of the Latin candidus, from which candidate derives, and white vestments are still worn by the Christian priest celebrating the Mass, but they have become shorter in the surplice worn for minor Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 47, the 7th of September, 2019, 9:40 a.m. 48 Elements of Natural and Divine Magic Services, because the character of divine science is white, like the color of the moon, which is under the feet of the Immaculate Virgin. But, my dear disciple, let us not plunge into symbols, which the great men of today describe as the first sign of decadence. Let us go back to where we started. If you break with the common people, you knock on the door of the invisible. Who do you invoke or evoke? A god, like the Theosophists, a genius, like the Kabbalists, an angel, like the Christians, the souls of the dead, like the spiritualists. Intelligent beings are divided into three classes: the gods, who are above, too far above for a common man to understand or perceive; the messengers of these gods, daemons or angels, who are in contact with us, and men. Be confident and courageous, said the Pythagoreans, because man belongs to the race of gods. He is not a dethroned king, but a king in exile, who is waiting for and slowly working toward his return to the throne. He is a splendid bird whose passion for pecking in the mud has pinned his wings, covering them with clay. The Pythagoreans warned, purify your body and your soul. Let reason be the sovereign and absolute guide of your life, and at the moment when death releases your soul imprisoned in your body, you will become a god. Genesis 3:22 is translated from Hebrew, Eki Adam quasi unus ex nobis factus ist, sciens bonum it malum, which Monsignor Martini translated having God say, now Adam has become one of us, knowing good and evil, and then he comments the us refers to the three divine personages, while the occult meaning is that Adam was created like unto the gods or the spirits of God. Therefore I consider my disciple capable of showing all his divine qualities, far from the vermin who pontificate slowly and incredulously, and of being above the infantile pleasure of hearing the Hermetic science of transformation. In 48 the 7th of September 2019 9:40 a.m. Elements of natural and divine air magic 49 applause or jeers of the sheep-like followers of science. I want him to be capable of perceiving the beauty of this man God, who still in his cloak of skin and muscles aspires to a perfection, which is not denied to other men, but which other men deny themselves, for the vainglory of being like all the others. You, my disciple, by escaping from the common herd, come nearer to the gods. Let the faithful pray in churches, synagogues, and mosques. Let peaceful creatures tickle their fancies with tables that rattle, or rise up. Enjoy the fact that curious and presumptuous scientists give their opinions on the physical effects of mediumism. Rejoice that they work for the Psyche of humanity and its progress, because the whole encyclopedia of phenomena comes down to putting a sensist and gross materialism on trial and to building an altar to the spirit of man. Dear reader, I forbid you, in my duty as a master, the freedom to use your common logic in regard to what is related to your spirit, which is not common, and I tell you that the day you place your faith in the reason of one man you will forever give up your own, which must be modeled on and perfected by universal reason, which is in line with your divine nature. 2. The second part of the preparation for magic tends to instruct you, through outlines, where to begin in order to succeed, how to place yourself outside doctrinaire soliloquizing, and how to see and touch and learn through your own experience and not through the experience of others. If, in carrying out the first part of your preparation, you are courageous and good in the widest sense of these words, if you understand precisely that your spirit, in its cloak of flesh and blood, is susceptible to all improvements to the point of becoming like a god of Olympus, a major deity, you can wait and enter into relationship with natures that are higher than the gods in the heavens. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 49 the 7th of September 2019 9:40 a.m. 50 Elements of Natural and Divine Air Magic. What are these middle-range divinities? These creatures or daemons or angels or messengers of God, with whom you will come into contact? Or, better, of what nature are these intermediate gods whom you must deeply wish to know? The best treatises on occult sciences tell you that, beyond human nature, in the ether, or in the astral light region, there exist the spirits of the dead, the astral bodies of the mediums and initiates, the elemental spirits, the human conceptions, the lemurs, the larvae, and all sinful and incomplete creations, as I covered in the introduction. but according to the first precept of the foregoing preparation you must think and reason for yourself. The initiator says to you, don't believe. Between faith and science there is an abyss. The initiator does not say believe, he says experiment. Now you must form for yourself a concrete but general concept of intradivine natures or daemons in their plastic forms as the ancients did, without clear-cut details that are more or less stupefying. It is sufficient for the student to have a general idea of what he will meet, and I follow the ancient method. So will you. Gods, daemons, and men, among them the same relationship exists as among the three states of perceptible matter, that which is heavy, that which is light, and that which is evanescent. The synthesis of nature presents the three states of matter, solid, liquid, and gaseous. This number 3 recurs in the kingdoms of visible nature. This number makes up the series in divine progression: man, the heavy body that imprisons an intelligence; daemon, the light body that comes near to intelligence; spirit, the evanescent body, which has not even an ideal form, and is symbolized by light. The philosophers say the theology of the ancients was symbolic, that the individual daemon or genius represents conscience, the sense of reason of a being. All right. That is one side of the question. But sacred wisdom, which the ancients manifested in their esoteric expositions, had three sides. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 57th of September, 2019, 9:40 a.m. Elements of Natural and Divine Magic. 51. A common side, which was used for the profane. B. A symbolic side, which was philosophical. C. An arcane side, which was sacred and reserved for those who had the right to enter the temple. What is the daemon or genius as defined in the plastic form of pagan esotericism? The ordinary man today would only smile. The daemon of the ancients and the protective genius of the Platonists are the putative fathers of the guardian angels of Christianity, and they are poetical figures. Those who make a show of their doctrine are content to see in the daemon or genius the soul of man in its essence as reason and conscience. Those who, on the other hand, are conversant with the sacred terminology of the philosopher priests, and have the key to the three sides of the arcane idiom, know that the third, true, profound meaning of daemon or genius of the ancients corresponds to a ray of light of what is, a truth that is the first toward which you, my disciple, must aim. I will set you a problem to solve. In order to succeed you have to study and practice the scientific theorems that magic teaches you or to which it alludes. You will understand their essence by studying and practicing. If you practice without reflecting, you will become an ignorant experimenter. The first goal you must place before your eyes in your approach toward the occult domain of the spiritual nature is to attempt to know the spirit or daemon or genius, which represents the step immediately above your nature, as a more or less perfect man. The Christian angel is a spirit of absolute purity and a messenger of God. The daemon, on the other hand, can vary in its tendency and purification. I will use the term genius to escape from restrictions and definitions. Once you have started to know your own genius, you will be able to define the first, and when you have known many you Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 51 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 52 Elements of Natural and Divine Magic will be able to have an approximate, but still imperfect, concept of the golden ladder, which starts from the least pure and ends with the most perfect. What should you do in order to know your own genius? The ancients taught that to know it one had to propitiate it by practicing justice, by the innocence of our habits. Then it will help you with its foresight in the things you do not know, give its advice in your moments of indecision, come to your aid when in danger, and it will not deprive you of its assistance in adversity, at times in your dreams, at times in visible signs, at times by appearing to you. It will help you to avoid evils, It will bring good upon you, it will raise you when you fall, it will sustain you when in doubt, it will lighten the darkness of your research, it will keep your fortune good, holding off bad fortune. What will your master tell you, so as not to resort to Christian mysticism and the veneration of pagan cults? Only one thing: be a man, be reasonable, and dominate with the continuous mastery of your judgments all the illusions of the gross material senses of man. Develop in yourself the consciousness of being, and if you deserve it or if you force outside nature, into your consciousness will come Raphael or Astero, the angel or daemon. Your genius will certainly appear, and like Dante you will have found your Virgil, and with Virgil the non-stop train to either the madhouse or divine wisdom. At this point, the disciple interrupts me: if these daemons are not visible because their body has no material that is visible to our eyes, how can I come into contact with them? I will not see them, hear them, or feel them, down here. That is clear. You have to form a clear concept for yourself of what, in its true significance, astral light is. In Greek grammar the word aster means star. In hieratic Greek, astron is made up of the negative prefix a and steron, the state of being fixed or solid, and thus means without fixity, wandering, and therefore Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 52 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. Elements of Natural and Divine Air Magic 53 Astral light in its secret sense is the light that is not fixed, which is wandering, ethereal, evanescent. Close your eyes, call up an image and observe it. In the darkness of your self-induced blindness you will see with a kind of sight, which although it is within all men's reach, is not the ordinary capacity to see, among other men. In this way, by a very simple action, which every man can do, you will begin to set in motion an exercise, which, if you just carry it on a little, will give you the idea of an ethereal light that is quite different from the light of the ordinary kind of sight. When you sleep and dream, the images you see are lit. And yet there is no sun, and that light is not sunlight or electric light, it is ethereal or astral light. The latest writers have called it the unconscious, but in Hermetic and magic terminology it is the astral field or the dark field, the source and repository of all our consciousness, but of this source and repository we have no awareness except the recollections we draw from it through continual evocations by means of memory. The astral, dark, mysterious field, which is within ourselves, that is in every human being, exists also in the immense synthesis of the universe. In a man it is the occult repository of his history, in the universe it is the matrix of all the lives that have been lived, of all the forms that have been imagined, of all the thoughts that have been willed. The universal astral field or current contains in itself all the partial astral fields of all men. Therefore from one's own astral field one can penetrate the universal astral field and from this come down to each of the particular astral fields. We said earlier that we men are concrete individualities in matter living analogously with the universe, that is, individualities in an analogical relationship with the larger universe. As in men, so in the universe, if it is analogical to man, there must asterisk the tunnels of Orpheus and the subterranean or priestly cities of the ancient initiates were astral, that is, without sunlight, and there the neophytes began to learn the truths. Therefore, we often find the ancients speaking of the stars, and instead of looking in the sky we must look below ground. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 53 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 54 Elements of Natural and Divine Air Magic be a kind of colloidal repository invisible and imperceptible to us where all the concrete ideas, the passions and actions of men, nations, and peoples are recorded and contained. This invisible part of the world containing this form of invisible but easily sensitized matter is what is called the astral region. When you say if you recall of a person you have seen, You are searching in your unconscious for the image of the person that you have seen and are evoking. But when you say, for instance, that you want to evoke the image of Dante walking the streets in Ravenna, you might have seen a portrait of Dante, but your unconscious will not be able to give you the image you require. Then you invoke the image of Dante Alighieri, and if you believe in spiritualism, you think you are invoking the spirit of Dante by the form he takes. Whereas your unconscious, if it is very sensitive, must tap into the universal unconscious, where Dante Alighieri's image has left its mark. So the astral region is a dark region, which is within ourselves, in which everything that is thought, heard, and everything that comes from the experience of our senses is recorded. Astral force is a synonym for the force of the subconscious, aura of the unconscious. From this interior region, which records every perception, every thought, every feeling, on certain occasions a change emerges, owing to which one feels the manifestation of a force that is released. Anything that is released from us and represents an effort or a great impression is fixed first on our unconscious as an individual, and then in its complex and synthetic phases it is fixed on the universal collodion. Since there are an astral region and an astral force, there must be astral matter. You cannot conceive of an occult force and matter unless you get sensory material proof of this movement or this matter. Therefore, when you hear true magicians and not storytellers of magic speak of Hermetic science of transformation. In 54 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. Elements of natural and divine magic 55 An astral current. You should not think it is the fluidic current coming from the stars, but the vibration of the ether of the Orphic initiates, that is, the manifestation of the perpetual vibrator emotion that pagan theogony deified in Mercury, the eternal generating motion of all the arcane phenomena of mental light. At Mercury's temples and feet there were wings, in his hand his caduceus, the rod with two serpents making love, an active and a passive current around a projector of fluid. So the caduceus has become the symbol of chemists because health, in occult medicine, is represented by two currents of ethereal fluid in equilibrium around a projecting instrument, an organ symbolized by a rod, from which you will later see how the magician's wand came to be, what use it has, and what mysteries it conceals. Now, as soon as you have formed an approximate idea of an interior light, you will be able to pass from the known to the unknown without being too much of a sophist. Get 3 or 4 or more people to close their outer eyes in the same way and open their intellectual or inner eyes to the perception of this world, which is glimpsed at first, and then seen with a sense that is a synthesis of the other 5. You will then have established by this relationship the communion of the light that each of the observers has perceived. I beg you to reread and understand well the last paragraph if you have not understood it properly, because I cannot find more exact words in human language to indicate a phenomenon that, although it is within every man's power, is not observed by those who do not concentrate and do not spiritualize themselves in order to do so. The relationship between the astral vibrations perceived by the observers makes up the astral current that, in due time, you must learn to master. Now, silence in religious communities tends to diminish as far as possible the action of all that can disturb the spirit or impede its development, so that the physical arm of the monk finds the arm of Christ. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 55 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 56 Elements of natural and divine magic. This astral current is symbolized by the serpent in the Bible as it winds round the tree of good and evil, which means that the two aspects of the serpent are the low, earthly, or muddy one, which generates illusions, that is, lies, while the upper part is truth and light. In mythology, Apollo pierces with his arrow the serpent Python, born out of the slime of the earth. Nevertheless, the Pythian priestesses, those who had the spirit of Python in their bodies, gave responses and prophesied. Giuseppe Balsamo, the well-known Count of Cagliostro, whose name, to fools, evokes that of an impostor, but who in the 18th century was called the divine, had as his symbol a serpent pierced by an arrow, that is, the astral current pierced by a powerful and mastered will. This serpent is at the feet of the Immaculate Virgin because virginity and purity condemn it to immobility and dominate it totally. But when you don't model yourselves on the divine Apollo, or on Cagliostro's willpower, or on the superhuman virtue of an immaculate conception, the serpent will entwine you in his coils, dominate you, and kill you fluidically. 3. The preparation for magic is as follows: a. To possess unlimited courage, and cold reason that is not kindled at the first flash of illusion. b. To have a high sense of rectitude and morality, and to be afraid in their name of abusing what one tries to snatch from the unknown. c. To wish for light, in order to comfort those whose earthly imperfection prevents them from seeing. d. To understand and make it understood that man has within him all that is necessary to develop the superhuman qualities of his spirit. e. To be persuaded that upright consciences, desirous of good, Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 56, the 7th of September, 2019, 9:40 a.m. Elements of Natural and Divine Magic 57. And being reasonable and whole, without hypocrisy and fear, invite the genius who is closest to the nature of the individual to become manifest. f. To be persuaded that the tide of opinions and trite phrases misrepresent, twist, and render badly the language that the genius addresses to our conscience, and that we close our ears to truth in order to listen to lies. g. To be persuaded that if the genius is taken as a guide, the astral serpent that appears as a sign of the struggle is dominated and one becomes a god. If, instead of understanding, one misunderstands, or rather one dreams of reproach, then one falls into the serpent's mouth. It is the moment to say a few words on the occult and the mysterious related to the duty of the aspiring magician to keep silent. Little by little, as the investigations of the learned progress in the determination of the latent faculties of the human materia, they come across new and unsuspected properties of our organism, and not only are the unheard of wonders of the human body discovered, but radical changes are glimpsed even in the definitions of our physics and our chemistry, at which the researchers of the next century will laugh, considering them as very flawed things. The silence of the surroundings for the spirit is almost like abstinence from indigestible foods for the stomach. But we must further distinguish outside sensations from sensations through repercussions, about which phenomenon a treatise on the mathematics of sense might be written. Your neighbor speaks to you. His words awaken a sensation in you. But if you pronounce one word, the work is doubled, because you must conceive the idea, put it into words, and project it in the spirit of that one listening to you. The word you pronounce is a fluidic projection of your conception, and the proof of this intensive effort can be found by any observer who, when hearing a word that does not correspond to an Hermetic Science of Transformation. Ind 57, the 7th of September, 2019, 9:40 a.m. 58 Elements of Natural and Divine Magic already held idea, must mechanically concentrate in order to catch the fluidic conception that accompanies the projected idea. In magic the word is an instrument of realization, and silence about the sacred things of truth is the way of keeping pure, for giving more life to the ideas that should be projected, while preventing the repercussions of projected ideas from upsetting the means of reception of the magician. In order to escape from the quagmire of concepts ingrained by profane education, in order to purify himself of all the living or impure images with which we are pervaded in our impure life, in order to drive out of our minds the great mass of impressions of human error, the disciple of magic will make endless efforts and long sacrifices. Once purification is reached, intellectual perceptions come. They are indistinct, and then fleeting flashes, and later clear ideas. If by using human words you want to define the fleeting glimmer of the first light, you will be wasting your time. If you make your perception concrete and project it with your words, you will have betrayed its nature. You will have tried to make human what is superhuman and divine, which reveals itself only to the best, and, like a sacrilegious man, you will lose the reason of that light. As regards the question, does magic really have a terrible secret that should be kept and hidden? And would the revelation of this secret, the arcanum of all arcana, be such as to destroy a world? I will answer in a few words. The philosopher glimpses a truth, which he cannot grasp, the secret of life, of death, of the reason for being, of the end of men, nations, races, and species. The Sphinx is the symbol of this problem. The disciple of magic must set himself the aim first of arriving in the presence of the last monster, which foreshadows the final problem, and then of dominating it, which is what Oedipus failed to do. If the magician succeeds in riding the monster instead of cutting off its head, he will be able to put the king's crown on his head. Otherwise, despite being Laius's son, a born king, he will have killed his father in a duel. And Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 58 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. Elements of natural and divine magic. 59 incestuously violated his mother, ending his days blind and exiled from his divine homeland. I must clarify 2 points. 1. Does the manifestation of any extra human being lead to the conquest of the astral serpent? 2. Isn't there a means for those who are alone, without advice or initiative, to open, however little, a way to the occult life? I will answer these 2 questions. The first answer is no, because the essence of what manifests itself is not always the same, but generally the genius of the pig is the swine, and the genius of the enlightened philosopher is a god. The second answer is yes. There are many roads that lead to Rome. One must ardently desire, and when one least expects it, one of the doors to the divine realm opens unto those who desire courageously. Ipse dixit. The spirit of occult initiation to the truth of the heavens manifests itself in proportion to mankind's self-improvement. When one least expects it, the genius of truth indicates a master behind a man who desires or a woman who prays. If the initiator is a real initiator and not a charlatan, the disciple perceives it, stretches out his hand to him, tries to fuse himself with the other's soul, and loves him. Love is divine. The disciple must love his master, because without unlimited love, which tends toward good, the mind of the disciple will not understand the heart of the master. I will stop here. I am neither a mystic nor an apostle. When one writes of heavenly things, the profane imagine one is dreaming. And yet, before inviting you to seek truth in cold blood, I will tell you, dream of loving a better world purely, sweetly, and poetically, and in your pious dream of an endless love you will become a poet, that is, a poet in the Orphic sense. You will have a feeling for sacred science, and you will sing the truth. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 59 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 60 Elements of Natural and Divine Magic. General Principles. I divide magic, or arcane wisdom, into 2 major parts, natural magic and divine magic. The former studies all phenomena caused by the occult qualities of the human organism and the way of obtaining them and reproducing them, within the limits of the organism employed as the means. The latter is directed toward preparing the spiritual ascent of the seeker so as to enable the relationship between man and higher beings invisible to the common eye. It is difficult to determine where the former ends and the latter begins, because human nature is made in such a way that as it gradually achieves the freedom to operate through its latent virtues, it perfects itself and is able to perceive, to the same degree of its development, harmonies that cannot be perceived by common intelligence. So, the 2 parts of magic, more often than not, walk hand in hand, and when we are able to perceive the guidance of a genius that may be outside of us, our spirit can work wonders. The first part includes all physical phenomena that derive from the occult, from telepathy to faith healing to telekinesis. Magic consists of a whole series of provable theorems and experiences with concrete effects. Magical truths, however abstract, must have their evident proof in a manifestation, just as any truth of abstract mathematics has its mechanical applications. We must, however, consider that progress in human research is strictly related to the passage of time, and if many occult truths can be proved by reasoning and hypotheses accepted by the experimental method, other truths can only be proved and considered absolute by observing their effects, because the abstract reasoning that would prove their existence is based on a subtle philosophy called Hermetic, which is understood only by the most advanced human intellects. Scientific experiments and proofs can begin to study, for instance, telepathic phenomena, as many contemporaries who have not been in Hermetic science of transformation. In 67th of September, 2019 9:40 am Elements of Natural and Divine Magic 61 are doing in Europe and America, while other truths, such as a corrupt man's shirt corrupts one who wears it, can only be demonstrated by the effects brought about by an operator or by the deep understanding of the law of contagion of virtues or vices that rules epidemics of vice and virtue. I beg my readers not to be amazed if I use words that may seem strange, and to believe that I am not using them thoughtlessly, but weighing them carefully, and therefore their meaning must be interpreted attentively. When I said epidemics of vice, I did not use a rhetorical device, but since our magic is synthetic, the fundamental synthetic principle of all laws is mathematically the same in all manifestations of the laws themselves. The law of fluidic contagion is constant in all different manifestations, and so just as we can have epidemics of diseases, we can likewise have epidemics of morality. Perhaps I am the first who has a mind to present a whole body of doctrines, which are exact and immutable, and which belong to the protasis of secret and sacred science, which nobody has yet unveiled to the unprepared public, and which nobody can unveil to anyone in its entirety. Therefore the disciple must not labor over the grammatical form of my phrases, but must try to assimilate the hidden meaning that is essentially scientific. Hermetic philosophy, which is the science engaged in investigations in the domain of the powers of the living human being that are not susceptible to verification, has its own way of looking at and experimenting with the existing forces and powers hidden and unknown to man. Ours is a bold mission of propaganda for the principles of a future science of the human spirit, of the human essence in living man. Our school, from the experimental point of view, is wholly materialistic, because the human being, body and mind, is only organized matter, or matter under organization. The normal phenomena we study in him are produced by his organism, therefore by the matter of which he is made. Thought is possible, in all the different forms. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 61 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 am 62 Elements of Natural and Divine Magic it adopts in us, in relation to the soundness of the organism, matter. The true disciple of our school must pose himself problems and solve them by himself, because Hermeticism is not taught in the same way as any other discipline, from a textbook. In the interior silence of the researcher there germinates the rich speculation of a most subtle philosophy, which creates and initiates the novice in magic and establishes a new vision of the universe, since it is necessary that the disciple of Hermeticism arrive by himself at the proof that ours is the only truth needed, and he can do so by moving from things below to things above, from Saturn to the Moon and from there to Mercury. The master of Hermeticism expounds the elements of our theory and practice, the disciple works with them and studies them in his secluded laboratory and rises toward the truth of Hermetic practice and realization. And in order for our school to have a gymnasium in which to pursue, through the first principles of the forces awakened in us, its own activity in the actual and practical realm of achievements, I have founded the Brotherhood of Miriam, the gathering of researchers of psychical science, whose activity affects the sick who come into contact with us and tries to cure them, or improve the state of their health, or soothe their pain and agony. We are the first to take into consideration and examine a new principle of modern therapeutics, the personal healing action of the physician, which modifies, enhances, and strengthens every medicine he prescribes, giving it a healing strength that prescriptions do not normally possess. Hermetic medicine, which is spirit, intention, breath, image, is distilled in the lunar body of the sick person, under a ray of powerful love, received between passion and faith. The cells of the tissues break up, reconstitute themselves, are healed, and life proceeds. The brain no longer feels pain, health, contentment, and peace of mind return. The miracle of one thing is accomplished as the miracle of love. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 62 the 7th of September 2019 9:40 a.m. Elements of Natural and Divine Air Magic 63:1. The perfect master. All creatures, before nature, are equal. This means that the initial relationship between the Creator and his creatures is constant. In fact, the law of evolution and the purpose of all human existence make all men equal in the sight of the first cause, whereas it is not the case that all men are equal in the physical domain, or in the domains of spirituality and morality. In the absolute, that is, without the specification of time and space, the truth of the law is unquestionable, but where space and time are defined, as in nature, all men do not have the same rights. Physically men differ from each other in their size and beauty, spiritually they differ in their more or less intellectual clear-sightedness. In human society, governed by the base instincts, gluttony, lust, greed, monarchies are made up of a majority of those who are physically strongest. The weaker ones, willingly or unwillingly, are controlled by the stronger whose greater physical perfection, aided by the necessary intellectual capacity, gives them courage to rule and an intolerance of subjugation. As in the visible world, so it is in the secret of the souls of the living, as far as the gifts and qualities of creatures are concerned. There are some natures that are spiritually advanced and others that are not. Among the former, there are beaming searchlights and candles, and among the latter, are poor, melancholy, and blind creatures who instinctively play with evil. Religions, science, and governments are hierarchical because in the three worlds, the physical, the intellectual, and the spiritual, men differ from each other in the development of their tendencies or virtues. The master of occult teaching is the most advanced in comparison with neophytes. No spiritual society can avoid this power of the master, because he Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 63 the 7th of September 2019 9:40 a.m. 64 Elements of Natural and Divine Air Magic. Who sees and understands more clearly will always be the teacher of the spiritually young. When a spiritual society is established, the master becomes indispensable. If the master is a master in the widest sense of the word, that is, he clearly sees and understands the synthetic laws of the three worlds, physical, intellectual, and spiritual, his authority becomes absolute, and his teachings or rulings are dogmatic. A dogma frightens without reason all the experimenters because they attach to this word a meaning it doesn't possess. A dogma is thought, cogitatio, clear-sightedness, from the Greek doko, to see. The word in magic corresponds, as I said in the preparation section, to fluidic projection, whose laws we will study, a thought, being cogitatus, that is synthetically coagulated in a master's psyche, concrete, harmonic, true, expressed in any graphic or oral form, is a dogma, because it is true in relation not only to philosophy, but also to morality and to practical realization, and it is immutable, that is infallible, if it corresponds to a truth that is absolute, infallible, and immutable. Darwin can dogmatize when he discovers and formulates a general law of nature, or St. Paul when he defines charity, or Epictetus, the Stoic, when he defines the nature of things. When religious or enlightened sects fall under the rule and dominion of leaders who do not have the virtue of seeing the single light, source of all eternal wisdom, they become temporal and short-lived, and their pontiffs or grand masters dogmatize while remaining subjected to the relativity of time, and free reason rebels against them because the dogma lends itself to discussion and open examination. A researcher in natural philosophy cannot be prevented from freely accepting or rejecting a statement of truth. The complete man, intellectually balanced, uses his reason before accepting or rejecting it, that is, he considers if the dogma has real value in terms of the eternal absolute. Nowadays, when a philosopher concludes that reason Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 64 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 AM Elements of Natural and Divine Magic 65 has killed dogma. By dogma he means something that doesn't have an absolute value. On the contrary, since dogma is the evidence of truth, it can only be reasonable, and the contrary is true. Dogma is the reason for the truth. Magic has some fundamental truths or dogmas, which are the statements of synthetic laws on which all secondary truths depend. The perfect master must have not only the power of vision, but also the power to pass on his spiritual gifts to others. Many masters see and operate with clear and perfect understanding, but do not have the capacity for giving, transferring, and conferring. In magic, any operator at all can temporarily endow men or things with certain virtues through processes that are part of elementary practice. However, if any operator at all can give, not all operators can permanently transfer or confer the natural virtues they have acquired. Operators in magic must make use of the equilibrium resulting from their progress in order to neutralize all adverse forces, and in order to be considered perfect masters in the two parts of magic, they must possess negative and positive virtues, be able to give and to take, to coagulate and dissipate all the psychic forces condensed around them, to temporarily grant their own virtues to a student or deserving disciple when doing an investiture. It is generally believed that science is learned out of books. But from the speculations of transcendental philosophy to the laws of mechanics, the only thing that teaches is realization or practice. Through reading one can reach a more or less clear idea of the thing, but only through operating under the direction of a perfect master can one develop the physical and psychical qualities that are of use in the reality of magic. The initiation into the practice is the whole of all the operations. The reader is advised to note that I am speaking of natural virtues and not of theurgic properties, which belong to the highest stage of magical development. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 65 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 AM 66 Elements of Natural and Divine Magic that a perfect master carries out on a disciple to grant, confer, confirm, and develop the virtues hidden in his common human organism. Now we come to the problem of the school, and to the mystery that in all times has formed the secret of magical sects and religions. Let us concentrate all our attentions on this. To the disciple in the present literary climate, in which every ordinary person, in the light of equality and liberty, wants to express his personal opinion about the occult sciences, the word initiate has acquired a very elastic meaning. Let's come to an agreement on terms before we go on. Where a master exists, there also exist disciples. An invisible thread binds the disciples to the Master and to each other, even without their knowledge. And all imagine a circle, place the Master in the center, or hence the concept around the circumference place the disciples, or of the mystic rose, many petals around a bud, which is its soul, spirit, force, and intelligence. Therefore, by initiate we must understand the disciple who has emerged from the dead water of the masses and has come within the zone of radiation from the center. This can be better explained by saying that whoever has the ability, has done all the work of purification and preparation upon a neophyte in order to detach him completely from the common milieu, drawing him out of the stream of the vulgar masses and elevating him to purer waters, to which the mob cannot rise owing to their natural weight, owing to that inflexible and inexorable law that condemns lead to sink and leaves to float. Proposition 1. Fluidic changes shine forth in the outer habits of the disciple. Generally the contrast between the new and the old life, between the transformed man and the common man, is enormous. Hermetic Science of Transformation. In 66 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. Elements of Natural and Divine Magic 67 The fluidic changes of the disciple have such a great effect upon his exterior, they shine forth in his outer habits in such a way that common men, that is, those who do not understand secret things, generally consider extravagant those men and women who devote themselves to magic. This is not only a logical but a necessary state of affairs, because if a man is made in the same way as the huge mass of creatures who populate the visible world, he cannot approach the invisible world and its creatures. The conflict between the visible and invisible worlds has as its basis the passion of temporality, that is, the visible world feeds on the constant fear of not having and not possessing, while the invisible world lives in the eternal certainty of taking when one wants and when one needs it. I will illustrate with 2 examples. The vulgar man loves a woman not only because men love women but also because of a sense, which cannot be confessed, and which exists in every animal and in every human group, of rating himself the most virile of men. It is the most natural thing in the world both for matter to claim its moment of dominion over intellect and for the reasonable man to give in to this momentary triumph of the flesh, once a partner has been chosen not only for her bodily perfection but also for her homogeneous and attractive moral kindness. But a common man doesn't stop here, at what should be his point of arrival. He becomes a Casanova toward all women who can stimulate his self-esteem. He must sniff the scent of every flower he sees, out of male vainglory, always behaving like a rapacious Attila toward all honest women who do not pay homage to him. Youngsters, adults, old men, feel it is their duty to degrade the essentially aristocratic human nature, which is divine in origin, in a muddy morass of base animal instincts that brand him forever a stinking goat. As soon as a man peeps into the realm of mysteries and shadows, the divine principle, which is within him, that is his spirit, acquires supremacy over his humanity, and those who do not recognize his hermetic science of transformation. In 67 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. 68 Elements of Natural and Divine Magic Aristocracy think of him in the same way as the roosters think of the little capons in the henhouse. Common men love money. Key to all the holy arcs for the vulgar, gold is a king before whom all the feelings of feigned honesty, all the false moral forces bow down. I need not give an example, everybody knows that for the masses money represents the most powerful talisman, bringing the serenity of a comfortable life, domestic peace, the satisfaction of all whims, the sweetness of all hired lovers. But the disciple of divine wisdom, aspiring only to a higher ideal, dethrones this king and continues on his way, with his cloak, stick, and knapsack, like a stoic who despises this idol, before whom, as before a beautiful woman, everybody bows down. an ordinary woman wants only to satisfy her vanity. Elegant in her ways, in her dress and hairstyles, she continually dreams of enslaving all men and of making all her friends and acquaintances green with envy. But the woman who, as a petal of the mystic rose, comes under the influence of a master, little by little, imperceptibly but progressively, gives up her vanity, and the eye of her mind soars ever higher. Proposition 2. The disciple's fatal test is in his separation from the master. The two streams, the false vulgar one, deceptive and very powerful, and the true and incorruptible occult one, work upon the disciple in the same way as two magnets of equal and opposing force work upon a piece of iron placed at an equal distance from their extremes. The piece of iron has no will, and when it is placed at an equal distance between the two forces it doesn't move. But the disciple has a will, which the master must never override, and this will pushes him a little toward one, a little toward the other, and so the disciple's soul, until his triumph or fall, knows a horrible torment, torn between believing in the promise of the light and feeling the attraction of the demon of the common stream. As long as the disciple is within the influence of the radiation of the Hermetic science of transformation. In 68 the 7th of September, 2019 9:40 a.m. Elements of Natural and Divine Air Magic 69 Master he absorbs the latter's occult virtues, and the vulgar stream has no hold on him because his master's influence destroys it completely. But as soon as the disciple is left to stand alone, he is subject to reactions, and two principles are at war within him.